Hey, Lynette. So are we still waiting for Merrimack TV, or I know Keith is probably coming on, right? Lynette, can you hear us?
Merrimack TV's on.
Keith and Peter coming.
Okay. Keith and Peter are coming on, you said?
They may not come until like 5:15 or so, though.
Okay.
I just figured I'd get it set up so I wasn't panicking at the last minute and couldn't get on.
Right. Then I guess we could get started in a few minutes if we want to give Merrimack TV a heads up. Okay. All right. We might as well start then. Okay, so welcome to the May 18th Board of Commissioners meeting of Merrimack Village District. I'll open the meeting at 5:02 p.m. And before we get started, I just want to make an announcement that due to COVID-19, the state of emergency, public participation will be offered by telephone. You can watch the meeting via video, which can be accessed at www.mvdwater.org. As a special courtesy, Merrimack TV is also recording the meeting to be posted on their website. And you can participate in today's meeting by calling 1-646-876-9923, entering meeting ID code 862-6757-5379. And all of that information should be on the agenda that's posted for today's meeting on MVD's website, mvdwater.org. So now I guess we can stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I'll get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. All right, so we can do a roll call next. I'm aware of Tony is the only one that's been excused for this meeting. We've got 4 commissioners. Myself, Don Preventure, I'm coming to you through Zoom from my home office here in Merrimack. Wolf?
Yeah, coming to you through Zoom as well from a home in Merrimack, Wolf from Train.
Okay, and then we've got 2 commissioners, Ken and Joe, over at the MVD office. Great. We've got Ron and Jill over there joining us, and Lynette from Underwood, and Amanda, our secretary. So I think now we're at the point we can do a financial review. Is that what we want to start with? It's on the agenda first. So if you want to get Michelle Holton, we could probably get.
Well, you just can't see her. She was off to the side. But
Oh, all right, great.
actually,
Okay, just want to start off with that these are draft financials for April. We still have a couple of items to post. Last week, we ran into some issues with our AP process and our New Hampshire retirement submission process. And also I had been out on quarantine earlier in the month, so we were doing some catch up. So I still have payroll accrual, which will be approximately $20,000 as an expense, and some bank recs to wrap up, and those will actually bring on additional income. Usually we'll have the interest in, usually if there's an item to be corrected, it would be something related to a revenue receivable deposit, as the AP and payrolls, except for the accrual, are all in. So that being said, over the next couple of days, I will finish those and then get the final reports out to everyone. Being through April in the fiscal year, we're 83.3% through the year. Looking at our revenues, we're coming in at 92.9%. A couple items to note with that. Don has pointed out before that the backflow account 40412 was looking off from last year. We have $20,000 that has been processed. We're doing a new system to handle the backflow, and it actually was attaching it to the next future bill of the customers. So it is in the system, it just hasn't posted yet because it's tagged to May, June, and July. But where the backflows have been completed, I'm going to work with Amy on the numbers so that we can, at the very least, accrue them in the coming months accordingly. So there's $20,000 that has already been processed that will be coming on the books. The system development account 40600, $239,000. That's the item that I've mentioned before. The DRA is researching how they want us to handle it. Everything going on. Not sure when the response is going to come back. It's something that we can work through with audit this year. Basically, it's not a traditional item that has expenses associated with it, since it's the buy-in for the system development, and they're not sure on the treatment. So even backing that out of our revenues, we would still be at 86.73% of our budgeted revenues. So we're still in a good position, even without factoring that in. Does anyone have any questions on any particular revenue line items?
No, just the two biggest ones, the first two, the domestic and mercantile water sales, those look like they're both about 79.5% of the budget. So it's a little shy of the 83. That just, is there a billing thing with that, or is it more or less just the less water use at the beginning of the year?
Two things going on, and we've looked in the past at our usage revenues over the last few years, and they have been, it has not dramatically increased as far as looking at the last few months compared to the decreases that we've been seeing. When I looked at last year's usage and just keeping steady and adding 19%, we came at residential off by 8.39, mercantile off by 14.46, and the industrial off by 7.44. Mercantile and industrial have had some reclassifications back and forth between those two categories. But as we said, residential, we have seen these declines in the last few years. Nothing has increased dramatically in the last few months due to the COVID-19. But we still did factor in the decrease. We factored in 10% for residential and industrial as a deduction, 15% from mercantile, when we did the unbilled. That's our projection for going forward. So to still be conservative as far as what we're projecting, because we don't know how things might change. And we have seen the usage ticking down a bit historically these last few years anyways. So we did deduct $53,000 from our unbilled projection that we posted for this month. Otherwise, our number for the unbilled last year, if we added on 19%, we would have booked almost 555,000 for the usage through April that hasn't been billed yet. With the 3-year analysis calculation, which kind of smooths things out, we came out at $547,000. We deducted the 53, so we booked almost 494,000, and that's as an unbilled item that we'll back out, and then we'll have actuals post through each month, and then true everything up at the end of the year.
All right, so it sounds like there's still some adjustments that could be coming to these numbers then, basically, right?
Well, what we're seeing is the usage has been coming down a bit, but one of the offsets are actual billing. When we look at our actual billing from last year for the usage and then meter, hydrant, and sprinkler, if we add on 19% for the rate increase, we expected $310,000 for the month of April overall, just for the 3 usage items, line items, plus meter, hydrant, and sprinkler. We came in right at 308, but it's not weighted evenly. I mentioned the usage was down in varying degrees from the 7.4% to 14%, but meter, hydrant, and sprinkler have gone up. That's due to a couple of reasons. One, Amy's been analyzing older accounts to make sure they're set up properly. And in instances, she's found out that they needed to be adjusted and billed accordingly. And also, we've had new customers coming on. So that's increased the meter, hydrant, and sprinkler because we've had especially a lot of multi-units. And a lot of the multi-units, you may be seeing some of the metered charges. They're starting to fill up, so we haven't seen full usage on them yet, as well as the hydrant units.
And Michelle, those unbilled revenues, we run them on the P&L, not on the balance sheet, right? So we declare them as revenue.
Yes, we do. With an offset as the receivable separated
Right.
as unbilled on the balance sheet.
Okay. Do we have process in place that avoid that we double book that accidentally when we have the next accrual coming in? So we back out the ones from the prior month properly? Do we have checks in place for that?
As part of my month-end checklist for both the payroll, the 2 accruals that we do are the unbilled and the payroll. And those 2, I have just an item on my checklist that I run through and make sure that it has been backed out and that we're starting at 0.
Okay. And the other question I had, so these, these challenges in month end, do we have items that we could possibly close prior to month end? That was one of the practices that I've come to learn to use to speed up the month end process at the actual month end. That there are certain aspects that can actually be closed before the end of the month, so we don't have to race to the finish line after the month expired.
No, I understand. And we had been getting right to that point as we sort of had to change over to our remote process, which has made some things such as AP a little bit more slower going present than it had been in the past. So as far as some of the cross training Shelley and I planned on doing to start getting month end going, basically as soon as we finished the last month end, that hasn't been able to come to fruition yet. And also this month we particularly had myself out for over a week. And then when I came back, I was catching up. And then last week we had the AP and then a New Hampshire retirement submission that had to be completely redone.
I'm not looking for any criticism. I'm looking for ways to, make your life easier by pulling some of those things that don't have to be done after the 30th or 31st. To have those done in the middle of the month, and then take the heat out of those first couple of days of the month.
No, definitely. I mean, we have items identified that we can do that. We're still trying to schedule and find the time for those in light of some other things that have going on, but it definitely is part of the plan. And actually, all things staying equal, I'm hoping that this month, we'll be much more on track and getting things out earlier, so that we'll have more time for review on both of our parts.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. As far as expenses, we've touched on a lot of the items that are slightly ahead of where we are in budget. I've also noted that the R&M range of accounts, starting at 70050, a lot of those that are showing well below budget. We have about $40,000 to $50,000 at present that are inventory adjustments that will hit the R&M accounts. We're still working through some reports with the element system. Our goal for that is also to at least do it quarterly, if not monthly. But we have some glitches that we're trying to iron out there, but the range is going to fall in between about $40,000 and $50,000 in additional expense that will book for May and then finalize the number through the year end. Does anyone have any questions on that item? Another item that we are seeing over budget but does need reclass is account 81900 engineering. We had several EGGI bills that came in that were related to the well 3 treatment alternative and the well 4 replacement that are hitting this engineering account. And we just want to look back through how we're going to be doing the funding there, and if some of that can be against the capital budget expense as well as posting it to the asset. So that's just something I have to look further. I wasn't able to access the our PO report. Today I was having issue with that, and our AP presently is with our AP person in transit coming back to the office. So I just didn't have that to go through, but there will be reclasses there, and I can do that in the next couple of days as we're doing the breaks in the payroll accrual. So we'll also make adjustments there. We're still going to be, I'd say, either close to budget or slightly over budget, even with those adjustments, because we have had additional engineering projects that we've decided upon. Questions there?
Any other questions?
And overall, expenses are at 73.2%. Last year, we were at 74.7% of budget. We had net income of almost $138,000 last year. This year, we have, looking at the draft financials right now, knowing that we have the payroll accrual, as well as we're going to have some additional R&M costs come on, but we're showing $761,000 in net income. So overall, our expenses are staying in check as they did last year. We've seen the rate increase, as well as the meter, hydrant, and sprinkler increase of numbers that we're seeing more coming from our revenues. What we'll be doing these next couple of months, actually, as soon as I get financials to our operations manager, as well as talking with Ron and Jill, we try to look at where we stand as far as budget for expenses and what any anticipated larger expenditures that we are aware of, if they're coming up, and what do we really see as truly falling below budget at year end and bigger items, and we try to manage that really as we make any major purchases from here on out to make sure we stay under budget. Any questions? Particular line items?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm fine too. Okay, thanks, Michelle.
All right, thank you.
All right, so next on the agenda, we've got, let's see, I guess Underwood is up to bat. Got various projects with them, so I don't know if Peter or whoever wants to start off Wells 4 and 5 treatment plant first.
I think Peter will start.
We're Team Underwood here today at MVD. Did you see my curtains? And Lynette and Keith?
Hey there.
The color of the day.
Nice.
Does Lynette have that too? Oh, she has purple too, huh? Missed the memo on that one, I guess. Okay, so just a quick update on 4-5. Contractor is proceeding with the work. Things are, I would say, somewhat on schedule besides the electrical components. We'll get to that in a second. A lot of subcontractors are on site, so they're moving along with that. In your packet, you received a change order status update on that. We are somewhere. We don't have a few numbers, but we're somewhere in the ballpark of 75,000 in change order items. Currently, we have an approved value of 80,000 for that. So the 80,000 is roughly about 2% of the contract. So we're getting, pretty close to that. We got a little less than $5,000 buffer on that. So we are looking to possibly increase that. Just so we had some room to add other items that they come up. But does anybody have any questions on what we have for change order items so far? Change order number 5 has not been signed yet. Those first 5 values, first 5 items, first 5 items and item number 7 have been approved by Ron.
I haven't seen anything new from the last meeting, have I? Those are the same as last time we looked at those, right?
I believe those are all the same ones. Yes.
That's what I thought.
I think a few of them were on there, and last time we had them as estimated numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have them as finalized numbers.
That might be a nice feature if you could highlight those that are new in comparison to last month, but we just don't repeat ourselves all the time.
Okay.
If
do that.
If it's not an issue.
Oh no, that's not at all. Yeah.
Peter, I think the one that's jumping out at me that might be new is the modified ceiling.
Oh, is that the one?
I think we just talked about that, I think last week.
Yeah, you are correct, Ron. Yeah. And on that one, we went from a parged ceiling to a fiberglass reinforced panel ceiling.
This organics removal, that was on there before for 11,548.
Yeah, that was on there before. Yeah. Still trying to work through that issue right now.
Is that the additional clearing we had to do?
The additional clearing, yeah, that was done. That was on the previous change order 3.
So this is an additional one?
Yeah, so this is organics that were subsurface organics that were not caught by we had 4 borings on site, and it did not hit any of these areas that we have thicker organics in. stuff. So we're just trying to contract to remove them, and we're trying to just settle in on a quantity and unit cost for those.
Great.
And I still need to get, I've asked Penta a couple times, still haven't gotten them back yet, is the cost for the removing of the well cleaning, so that item number 8 will actually be a credit to you. Yeah.
Great.
So I guess we probably are less than 75,000 that, you know, when you add in that credit. So, but I didn't know if you wanted to, you know, right now, you know, as it stands right now, we got about $4,400 left in contingency. That's noted right on that last block in the bottom. I didn't know if you wanted to increase any of that right now, or wait till a subsequent meeting to do that.
Do you know of anything that's coming down the pipeline that is going to hit in the near future that we got to consider, or?
I do not know of anything. We've been trying to hit things as they've been coming along. Ron, do you know of anything else that we do not have on this list?
Nothing's jumping out at me.
Yeah, let me just check the meeting minutes from the last one and just.
Yeah, I just checked. So actually, so that was a little confusing. So I was only looking at the title change order number 5, and we had that last time with items 1 to 4. 1 to 3 are identical. 1 to 4. Item 4 is the remove number 4 cleaning, which is now item number 8 in change order number 5. So that has been pushed down to another number, and for some reason that change. I would have figured once the change order is listed here, there's no new items, sub items added to a change order. I guess that's not true, right?
Yeah, I did modify some of the order of some of those, yes.
Yeah, so we have to look at, I only looked at the main numbers of change orders, and that didn't change. I didn't realize that we might change line items underneath that.
Yeah, so what I was
So
doing, at least on that one, we were initially looking at trying to finalize change order number 5. So I was sliding down items that we didn't have final values for us, kind of pushing them down to the end. So if we, you know, they had to slide to change order number 6, I could just slide them down. That's, I can not do that from now on and just leave the items numbers the same until we finalize a change order, and then we might have to slide an item down to the next.
It's probably a little cleaner. Otherwise, we change the numbering assignment, and then we might get a little bit rather confused. At least I did.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay.
This is Ken. I have this question on number 8, the removal of the credit that you're talking about. When will you have an idea you might know the dollar amount for that credit?
I'm hoping to find that out very shortly, you know. So I have, when we had a meeting with Penta last Thursday, and we asked about that again, and they said that they were going to ask Barry Miller for that again. So I'm not sure where that exactly stands. So I will push Penta to. I'd like to get that onto this change order, because we'd like to finalize this change order before the end of the month, because there are a few items on there that they have worked on and would like to get paid for. So I'd like to get it, you know. I'll see what I can do. We're definitely tracking that one, so no doubt we'll get the credit, you know.
I know you don't know the exact amount, but what you think the estimate might be for the credit?
So, Ron, you know what they charge roughly for cleaning your wells, right? I'm thinking it's between 10 and 15 or something like that, or?
I was guessing, but I mean, we can certainly pull an invoice from well 5.
Yeah.
I think you did that 2 meetings ago or something, and it was right around $10,000.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought you did that before, and we had talked about a number of 10,000 things line item.
For the contingency, what are you looking to ask for dollar amount wise? for, you know, they up that 4,000 that's left.
Oh, how much we looking, to increase that?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know what you wanted to do, so we have 2%. I didn't know if you want to do another, 1%, another 40,000, if you wanted to do something less than that. I would, it's kind of up for conversation of what you guys would like to do.
What I like to do is look at the percent of completion of expenditures, planned expenditures for the project, and how they relate to the contingency. Do we have, what level of completion are we at for the project from an expenditure standpoint?
I mean, how much we have paid the contractor?
Right.
Well,
Well,
I think
out of the assigned budget or allocated budget for the project.
right. I think he's at probably about 60% right now of the total contract value.
Contingency on the budget was, we talked about it the other day. What was it?
Yeah, so we initially we didn't have anything in there when we started. Then we added in, I think, 40,000, and then we added in another 40,000. So we're up to 80 right now of approved contingency dollars.
So we're 60% of. The
Yes,
big expenditures are coming now with the commissioning of the plant, right? So
Pardon me?
The big expenditures are coming now with the commissioning of the plant here the next couple of weeks with all the hardware and software installation.
Yeah, so most of the stuff that we've, if you look at some of the change order items, a lot of it has to do with some of the site work, and the site work is, any surprises in site work, I think are done right now. They've still got to install the 15-inch main out to the railroad. They have 26 feet of it coming out of that interceptor manhole, so out of the railroad right away, but they have to complete that, and they're coming back right after Memorial Day to do that. So that would be the only other digging they do. The rest of it's going to be filling, bringing in gravel, screening loam, no digging to find surprises, I guess. So I think, so that part is done, but I assume there's going to be some other things as we get going along, with, all the other interior of the building, that there'll be some other, smaller items too. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have almost 15,000 to go here together with that credit. So if we add another 20,000, we have 35,000 to go, right? So
we could do that. Yeah.
That's a pretty good amount, but not something out of the ordinary.
Yep.
So I'll make a motion to add $20,000 of contingency to the project.
Second.
Okay, motion by Wolf, second by Joe.
Do you want to add wording in there that the total now will be 100?
Yeah, we can do that. It's going to raise the contingency from 80,000 to 100,000. If that's all we need, then I think that's all right. So we got a motion by Wolf, second by Joe. Anybody else have any final questions or comments on that? If not, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. And we'll do a roll call. We'll do a roll call. I'll start myself, Don Preventure. I'm in favor. Wolf?
Yes, sir. In favor.
In favor. Joe?
Favor.
In favor. And Ken?
In favor.
Okay, Ken's in favor, so that passes 4-0-0. So the contingency has been raised to 100,000. And yeah, if at some point, if you can work out those final numbers on the credit on well 4 and all that, help us understand, where we are standing. That'd be great.
Yep.
So I think we wanted to, did you want to talk a little bit more about the delay in the VFD,
Yes.
I believe as it is?
Yeah, actually, it's not so we initially had a delay in the VFD that was supposed to be coming in late June. That is still scheduled to be coming in late June. What we recently found out is some other electrical components, such that the main circuit breaker and the LP panel, which is a lighting panel, those have been delayed and are supposed to be coming in July. So we are kind of a little bit taken aback by that one. They said it was COVID related. The plant that they were getting that was manufacturing the plants is down in Mexico, and that plant shut down for COVID-19, and now they're coming back online, but coming back online at a reduced capacity. So that's why that got pushed out. So contractor came in and told us that, and we were looking for additional information from them on that. Wolf was at that meeting. He expressed some of those same concerns. We did issue a letter to them saying that we need documentation on that, and today we issued email to them, specifically asking questions about, what have you, what is some correspondence that you had so far about the delay? What have you done to mitigate that delay from that manufacturer? Have you looked at any other manufacturers for that? So we're trying to get some more information from them, and that we can relay off to you. The one thing
go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing they did mention after the meeting, which does make some sense, I'm not sure how it will play out, but if they do change manufacturers, then they would have to go through another round of submittals with, a different manufacturer to make, so if you're going from GE to Square D, then you gotta submit a different, shop drawing, so that they submit a different, I don't know how that all works. And one thing that came up when I was also reviewing the minutes, Wolf, before you got there, I'm not, maybe you did hear this, but one of the things that they talked about was that the electrical subcontractor has a PO already with the manufacturer that they say they can't break. I don't know if they can break it or not, but that was one thing that they did talk about. I'm not sure if you heard that part or not. Yeah.
So, Don, you haven't been on that meeting, Ken and Joe. I have to admit I was a little taken aback about the unpreparedness of, and Bill was the gentleman I was talking to, right?
Yes, it was. He's the project manager for Penta. Right.
That's not one of your employees, right?
No, it is not.
Right. Okay. So I apologize if I've been a little bit rough in that moment, but I was really disappointed. If I go into a customer meeting with delays, I usually have my reasoning and my explanations and the avenues pursued ready for the customer to review and to present it to them. He had none of that. I was really disappointed by that, and he seemed to not be super fazed by it either. He seemed to just accept the realities as they are, and that's just something. After all the money and effort that this team here spent and the MVD spent, I'm not willing to just let it go like that. Right now, we're looking at how many weeks of delay?
So that those components probably should have been there around now, and if they're due in July, I'm guessing like at least like a 2-month delay or something.
Correct.
Yes, and I don't know exactly what their and maybe we'll get that with the information I requested about correspondence of things. So they might be saying in there, well, it was supposed to be delivered, May 10th, and now it's coming in July 20th or whatever, so it's about a 2-month delay, I'd guess.
Yeah. So, and that's the part that I was also disappointed that he was not able to really answer the question. It's not clear. Is it the actual enclosure, the panel itself, like the physical sheet metal enclosure, that needs to be manufactured yet, and that we were delayed here, and that prevents the manufacturing of the the custom panel with all the different components installed, like VFDs, disconnects, whatever it might be, installed in it, or is it the custom manufacturing of the custom, completed panel that's missing, right? That apparently is being done in Mexico.
Yes, that's one of the things we did ask him too, is, what is, because he was noting that there's some customization of it, that makes it that you can't just purchase it anywhere. So I said, I asked him, I said, what is the part so that's another question that we posed to them too. Right. Yeah.
So again, and I mean, if he's being delayed in his project by 2 months with all the penalties and everything that we have on these contracts, I'm really disappointed that he didn't have those answers ready to go, or at least radiated somehow that he's on top of this. You guys heard yourself how defensive he got when I cornered him a little bit. I was really disappointed by that, which goes to show you he was unprepared, right? And a 2 month delay without challenge is just something I've never heard in a multi-million-dollar project. So, and I do appreciate that you picked up on my suggestion to track any costs that we have for remobilizing other contractors, or any additional backflushing and commissioning efforts, workarounds that we have to come up with that may cost us additional temporary piping or whatever it is that we need to come up with to be able to keep the project going somehow due to this delay. That's definitely something we need to track separately and go back to whoever caused it with all the power that the contracts allow us. And I understand that this is a Penta subcontractor, but we do have obviously leverage onto Penta as well, right? And I do think that it's important that Bill and his managers are aware that we intend fully to go after them for that.
Okay.
So appreciate the letter that you guys wrote and the emails and the summaries. That helped me a lot. So I understand we have penalties up to $1,000 a day that we can impose on Penta.
Yes.
But it refers you to liquidated damages. Is that a contractual penalty, or do we have to actually produce the damages, and then it's up to $1,000 per day?
Yeah, you produce the damages, and the damages are typically engineering costs.
So we don't have a contractual penalty of X number of dollars a day per delay?
It is not, how it's written in there, it does not, it says, this is not a penalty, but it's meant to cover damages. So the damages that you get, and then, so your damages are engineering costs, and then if you can justify other damages for.
My experience, Wolf, is when we've invoked this clause, because it's a pretty standard one we've been using in the state, I've seen it been higher, I've seen it been lower. Typically what we do is throw a number at it that is presumed to cover damages. But in the end of the day, we've always had the opportunity to show real damages. If it's less, it's less. If it's more, it's more. So the idea was that if we have a contractual number, then you can avoid an argument. Everybody just agrees that's close enough. But 9 times out of 10, when we've gone through with the liquidated damages steps, we've established real costs. And that's what's on the table.
Yeah, my experience though is, and maybe that's some discussion for future contracts, but my experience is if you just basically, define a daily penalty for delays independently from the actual damage incurred, you don't have to go back and now go through your records and produce those damages, which again costs time and money. Second of all, you have a number out there that the contractor is fully aware of. If I don't meet my deadline, it's going to cost me $10,000 a day, period. Right? Yep. And that's just contractually agreed upon. So I don't have to keep discussing that and negotiate it. I miss my deadline for reasons that I, as the contractor, have to justify. $10,000 a day it is. Right? So this may be something that's not common in the public sector, but in the private sector, it absolutely is. And it makes things cut and dry, right? There's no two ways about it. And it's a very motivating element, obviously.
Is there equally, in some of your experiences, a reward clause as well, or is there just usually the penalty clauses?
It can be both.
We use the state front end in this one, because it's a funded project. So to some degree, it's an older set of documents, but it doesn't mean we can look at some adjustments going forward, but that's how it's been typically handled.
Understood.
But it is on the table, and it is identified as 1,000.
I appreciate that.
Is there really nowhere else that we can think of that this equipment can be in supply somewhere, that we can get it from a different location? I'm just curious how much he really tried to track down this equipment from a different source.
And that's one of the questions we asked him, and I noted in there, I said, please back it up with, letters and emails, that you had for the correspondence. So it's not just somebody saying, well, I made a bunch of phone calls or whatever, or something like, at least we're looking for something to be documented more.
I'm even wondering if they would let you make some calls to verify the people they were talking to or something, just to get the straight answer. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying there's some other reason why the project's being delayed. I don't know, what the contractor schedule is like, if there's a problem there too or not. But it just is very unfortunate that, we kind of wanted this thing to be done before the summer hit. Hopefully we're not going to go into a drought where we're going to be running scarce on water and stuff. But again, I think we got to do all we can to justify what the delay is. And if we can seek that damages or not, liquidated damages at some point. So I don't have anything more to say than that, I guess.
And maybe quick, you said that usually the engineering cost is what is the liquidated damages. But again, I would anticipate that we have some contractors that we have to remobilize. They're going to be now losing 2 months of progress, and they're probably going to pull the troops for some other projects for those 2 months, and come back 2 months later, right? So now we have 2 months of rental equipment, trailer rental, equipment rental, power drops and whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think the contractor would be asking for that, because those would be costs that he would be incurring. Those aren't costs that you would be specifically incurring.
As long as we don't get dinged by that, yeah.
Right, yeah.
So we certainly would have to watch that.
Right.
And since this is a general contractor, all the other contractors are on his payroll, right? So, or on his time. So, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's at least one good thing.
And then in terms of some other costs, I know we talked a little bit about it with the VFDs and also these components of, can we start up the GAC equipment, without it? And, looking into it a little bit more, is that we have the piping in there already that's coming back from the distribution system, because we designed it such that we backwash with the distribution system. So we certainly can be coming back in there and, back feeding up into it and doing some of that startup work. So we have that capability. So we'll have to look through all the details, because I know we'll have to run filter or waste for a while and see if we have the interior piping for that. But, I think there's some work that they can be doing on the startup of those GAC vessels with all the piping that we already have.
So one more time, right now it's the lighting panel and only the lighting panel, or is the VFD panel also affected?
The VFD panel is not what they were talking about at this last meeting. The VFD was talked about at the prior meeting. So they're talking on this one was a lighting panel and a main panel. And I think there was a third item in there, and I'd have to go back in the emails and look it up. So the VFD is still scheduled to be delivered at the end of June. And then those other panels that they were talking about are in the July timeframe.
Yeah, so if the main panel is probably feeding then the VFD panel, right? That's probably the building main shutoff. So it doesn't help us anything that the VFD panel is coming earlier.
The only thing is the VFD panel comes in earlier. It can be installed and be ready for it. So the contractor is actually incurring additional costs on this, because without his main, circuit, main panel in there. They're not PSNH, well, Eversource now is not running electrical to the building. So he's running off a temporary power right now. So he's incurring extra costs right now with that. And he might turn around and make a claim that say, hey, this is something out of my control and I'm incurring some costs and stuff like that. So
Yeah, we'll see about that.
yeah. So so
Do you feel like this was the correct time in the schedule for that equipment to be ordered, or was that equipment ordered a little bit later than it should have? Or is there any of that question in your minds, or?
and no, I do not know that. And that might have been a question. I could send them an email on that and say, when was it ordered?
Right.
That would be a nice piece of information to get to, I think.
It would. I mean, at least then we'd know what, if there's really if it's a true problem that we couldn't do anything about from the start, it was ordered early and now is a problem, or is it something that was ordered later than it should have been? And maybe if it was ordered earlier, we might have it by now or something.
Right. Yeah. I know Penta was doing that, and this is a Penta sub, but Penta was doing when all this, COVID-19 stuff started coming out in the, January, February timeframe. I know they were ordering a bunch of their materials and getting them on site, getting them into a storage shed, and just so they would have them.
Right.
But that was Penta's work. It wasn't Penta's subcontractor. So I'm not sure how much the subcontractors did the same thing. So,
Yep.
So our workaround of using the system supply lines for backflushing that we have in place anyway, any of those valves and so on, is that all functional without having main power to the system at all?
Yeah, they're all manual
manual.
valves. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's good news. Okay.
Yeah, so I know we can do some of the backwash, and I'll have to verify that we can do all of it with how we can get through the pipe rack and go filter the waste and all that kind of stuff too. So
okay, yeah. Okay, at least that. Good. Okay, I'm done. I'm shut down.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's all does anybody else have anything more? That's all we had for 4 and 5.
No, just you have any update on the well screen and all that stuff? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, so and Ron might have a little more information on this, but I believe that the screen has been, so the new well number 4 has been drilled. They did a SIP analysis on it. They designed a screen, and the screen was ordered, and I believe the screen is coming in this week, and then they're going to be installing that. Is that correct, Ron?
I was gonna say it's on site, but that's the pitless is on site.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke to Barry today, and there's still,
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That the screen is still pending. I'm hopeful that we will get it next week, so that it would be able to start installing that screen in the next 2 weeks. That's the goal. But it's been a little delayed. I think the screen has been delayed for a number of reasons. I'm not sure the factory was actually operational for part of during the pandemic, so that's been a little bit cloudy on our end. Anyways, we're hopeful that we'll get the screen next week.
Yeah, then Dan was mentioning that he thought once the screen went in there, they can do the testing, and he was shooting for, the end of June, maybe.
Yeah.
Bit into July.
We're filing with the DES the discharge, the proposed discharge for the pumped water, because we have to run. I think we have to run a 72-hour test on it. So that's we're working out the details with DES now. Been a little more difficult because DES is not in their offices either. So.
All right. I'm all set with wells 4 and 5. I don't know if anybody else has any questions. If not, maybe we can move on. All right. Sounds good.
I was going to touch on 7 and 8. you may have seen already that we delayed the bid. The bids were originally due on the 20th, or through the last addendum, we're due on the 20th. It's 2 days from now. We delayed it to the 27th, one more week, because we got some feedback from Avoca, who's the named carbon supplier for this, regarding the warranty. And they were objecting to the way the warranty was written. So we had some discussions internally and came to the conclusion on how best to handle it. But in essence, they had done their own RSSCT, if you recall, because we had done one and they wanted to do their own independently, and they're finding different results than what was done by our third party vendor that did the RSSCTs for us, such that they believe that they can't meet the warranty that was stated in the contract bid documents. So after several discussions internally, Avoca did offer to run another RSSCT, basically thinking or wondering if the data that they presented or the results that they found maybe aren't reliable, because we're seeing a certain amount of bed volumes with 4, 5, and 7, 8 in a certain way. They went out and did a test and they came back with half. So we're wondering if there's some validity to that. So Lynette's here too, if there's some questions on the details of that. But we are already in the process of shipping more water down to Evoqua to run another test. And the short answer is, after debate internally, we decided not to change the warranty. It was a warranty that was originally worked up with Evoqua at the time. And so we're keeping the bid documents whole at this point, and then waiting on the results from the new RSSCT. And if we have to have a discussion with Avoca at the award time or the contract signing time, we would deal with it. We would deal with it then. But that's how we're handling it. The reason we delayed the bid is because we wanted to put it in front of you, just to make sure you concurred with our approach. But at this point, we wanted to hold the warranty, and that's how we're handling that.
So the bid, you're planning on holding the bid back until
the bids will be open. The addendum went out, and the date for bid opening now is the 27th.
Okay. So we're not waiting on the new RSCT result to come back or anything like that.
No, what we sort of are trying to do is to keep to schedule to the best we can. We wanted to get this in front of you. If we didn't delay the bid, we would have had to made the choice independently and unilaterally, but we wanted to make sure you guys were comfortable with what we are proposing here, because we would have time to put out another addendum. We gave ourselves a week. But if you're in agreement with our approach, what will happen is the RSCTs will happen in parallel to us going through a contract review and putting a recommendation for award together, so that we would start seeing results from this new RSSCT about the same time. So we would be dealing with it then. And the short story is the RSSCTs that Avoca was doing is a different method that's a shorter duration, so we would able to see results sooner. But that's what we're proposing to do.
Okay.
So there's no change on this. What you will need to anticipate, if we want to keep schedules, we may want to be talking to you about having an interim meeting to deal with a contract award. I think we mentioned that last time to you. So if the awards come in clean and we're ready to make a recommendation, we may not want to necessarily wait till your June meeting if we're ready to do something sooner. So we may be talking to Ron and Jill about potentially scheduling something if we can cut off a couple weeks. But that'll be, we'll wait and see what happens when the bids come in.
Okay. So the 27th is the next, the date, the new date?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. What Evoqua wanted us to do was shorten the warranty period, and we weren't ready to do that. And so to give us some more time, we felt the best course of action was add the week to the bid, so we could get our hands around the issue, including speaking to Jim Malley, including, going to some of our resources just to make sure we're on the right track here. So the delay in the bid opening was just a reaction to make sure we weren't making a quick decision. We didn't want that pressure, so we gave ourselves a little bit of time, and it allowed us to get it in front of you in case there was something else we wanted to do.
Okay.
So that was a call I made our Thursday night when Lynette and Peter called me in a panic. I said, well, let's delay the bid and let's sleep on it and think about it, which is what we did.
Okay.
But it was a little frustrating to hear that from Evoqua after working with them so closely. So at such a last minute too.
Right. Right. Anything else on wells 7 and 8 or any other questions?
Just an update on the bidders. And maybe this is just more of an FYI, but the bidding climate, we're finding probably we're going to see different bidders in this round. Two of our people that worked in Merrimack on these projects for us in the past likely aren't bidding it. Like Penta right now is saying they're too busy. PRB, who built 7 and 8 originally with the iron and manganese, are saying they're too busy. Another one of the typical contractors we see, Apex, is saying they're too busy. So we still have 4 other plan holders. I asked Peter earlier, he thought at least 3 of them would be bidding. So it looks like we'll get 3. We have 1 contractor who's asking a lot of questions, so they're obviously seem to be interested in it. But what we are finding that some of the schedules and the work through the winter again is creating a little bit of a challenge for some of these guys because of their current workload. So we are taking the approach, because I think the districts wants to do that we're trying to keep the schedule as the first priority, even if it means working through the winter. And even if it means we, lose a potential bidder or 2. So we're throwing that out there. That is generally the direction we believe we're getting from you. Contractors have asked us, if you delay this, if you give us winter shutdowns, I may bid it, gives me more time. You may have more bidders, but then again, that's more delay. So right now we're holding to it, unless you guys think you'd want us to approach it differently.
I'd say see what we get for now, and then if it turns out that, can we reconsider the bid if we're not getting the number of bids that we want?
You can reject all bids.
Okay.
You have that right.
All right. I don't think I'm ready to give up the timeline through winter or anything at this point yet. Hopefully we won't have to.
Okay, well, we'll stay the course.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that, or I don't want to speak for everybody?
Good.
Okay. All right. Should we move on to wells 2 and 3? You guys all done with 7 and 8 at this point?
Back to Peter.
All right.
Yeah, so well 2 is, so we're started to get the design work done and getting, approaching the 60% design submittal. So we're working towards that right now. One thing that came up that we wanted to get input from the board was, and it's in your packet, it's the site plan for well 7 and 8. Well 2. And so you can see where the sort of the buildings, going to be located. The one thing that I wanted to point out was and if you can see it up on the top of the page where it says stump dump, and that's pointing down, in the rectangular area is where the stump dump is. So when we were doing the survey work out there and marking out things, well, prior to, I think we talked about that the property owner cleared on the MVD property, right? So we talked about that in prior meetings. But when we were marking out the borings for the project, that property owner was doing some work out there and digging up, the stumps, and was looking to plant grass. And, so we talked to him and said, wait a second, you're doing, more work on MVD property that, you don't have authorization to do that. So he showed us where a stump dump was located. So I actually painted those limits out, and our surveyor was coming out there the following day or a couple days after. So I showed him that stump dump. just so that could be accurately located. For two reasons. One, if you determine that it's okay to leave, at least you have it noted on the plans where it is in case you want to do something in the future. And two, if you feel that you want that property owner to remove the stumps, now you know what that area is.
Huh.
So the other thing that they did was, if you look along that property line, there's some small triangles along that property line. What the surveyor did was we had them stake out that property line. So now the property owner has an idea of exactly where that property line is. When Ron and I met with them out on the site, we expressed to him, about where that was located, and he understood that somebody cleared beyond that, and he did not, at least from what the property owner was saying, he did not direct the person doing the clearing. This person was going around, offering to do some clearing, and they went in there and just started cutting down trees. So I'm not sure exactly how that was all defined and how far to go, but you can actually see if you look at the drawing, you can see the clearing limits, and they're well into the MVD property.
So I was going to ask, those brush lines or whatever, that's the current clearing?
Yes, it is. That sort of little wavy line type of thing. Yeah.
So was that a logging company that just like harvested MVD trees basically, or?
Well, it was some logging company, and they went in there. Yeah, they took your trees. Yeah.
So they took our trees, they buried our stumps on our land.
Pretty cocky.
Yeah.
Do we know who that was?
Yes, the property owner does. Then
I don't want to name them here in the meeting, but I would like to know who that is, and maybe they can do some work for us for free somewhere else.
Okay, so I'm not sure. So I don't know their names, the contractors' names. The guy doing the clearing, from what the property owner was saying, didn't have, he later found out like he didn't have a license to do clearing in the state and stuff like this. So I'm not sure exactly, what all happened with it. Yeah.
I don't think we can do anything with the contractor. I think if we wanted to do something, which I don't, I would just say it would be, you'd have to go after the owner, and the owner would have to go after the contractor, I think. But
well, that's why I'm confused. I mean, the owner of the existing building here on the map, I'm not going to name the address, obviously. The owner obviously knew that contractor was going to be doing this work, or maybe even ordered them or approved them or allowed them trespassing over his property. So, I mean, there's something not quite kosher going on, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, and I don't know if you want to, have him come to a meeting and talk to him about it. I want to bring this up to you to, in case you wanted to do something, at least now you have a plan, instead of us just saying, hey, they cleared onto the property, there's a stump dump on there. Now you have a, good idea of the limits of what happened out there. So.
How does it look there right now? Does it look like a war zone, or is it neat?
No, because he buried the stumps. It's actually not, fairly smooth out there. So all that clearing area, it looks decent. But but if it looks decent and turns into grass, then does he continue to think that that's his property and keeps going over it? So, I think it would be a decent idea to, somewhere along that fence, maybe put in like 3 or 4 sections of split rail fence just to define, okay, here's the limit. So you're defining that limit, he sees it, and then he's only mowing up to a certain area, and then the rest of it, just starts to come back as woods again.
Yeah.
Impact on the well.
Pardon me?
What is the impact of that stump dump on our well?
I don't think it has any. Jamie, do you have any? It's probably about, I would guess, 600 to 650 feet away from the well.
Does anybody know what the water table is right there?
We will find out where the water table is once we get the borings from the geotech work. My guess is that it's dry.
Okay. In the water table, there's tannic acid from deterioration of stumps. It might impact the well.
Right, exactly. Jamie, do you have any feedback on that?
Well, we don't like them. I'm gonna tell you that. I don't like them. It's outside the protective radius, so it's not something that would be regulated. At the end of the day, I don't know what the size or how much stuff is in this stump dump, but as Joe said, you got issues with tannic acid and color and things of that sort. So how big is it, Peter?
I would say, I don't have a scale on his drawing. I'm going to guesstimate it is probably like about 70 feet by about 15 feet.
It's pretty good size.
And it's actually, sorry, I was thinking about it's more of the 550 feet away from the wellhead.
So
my worry is what else is buried there. We don't really know, right? It could be empty gas cans and oil cans from the chainsaws, and we know how that goes.
What property is it on right now, Peter?
It's on MVD property. The well 2 property.
I mean, to be honest with you, we'd probably have to do some sampling to find out if we got some issues. I mean, Wolf is right. I mean, construction debris and materials that you don't know. And what well is it close to?
Well 2.
Well 2. I don't know. It's your number one source. I mean, I would not close my eyes to it completely. I mean, honestly, I think it's something that needs probably a little bit more background and a couple more asks. I mean, we need to know a little bit more about it.
I would agree.
Yeah, from what Ron and Ron, correct me if you thought it was different, but when we were out there, we saw the contractor. He was digging another stump dump on more onto their property, but I would say approximately the same distance from, well number 2. And, what he was looking to bury was piled up stumps and some other slash. So it didn't look like there was like construction debris or anything like that. Would you say that too, Ron?
I would agree. So when we did our site walk, it wasn't stumped at that time. So it does appear that it's just the stumps. It was the time period from when we did our site walk to when the survey, when Pete went out to mark out for the surveying. So the chainsaw, they weren't there. The loggers weren't there, anything like that. So it was really just the down trees. We were just cleaning it up for grass. So I wouldn't think there's anything buried other than stumps and brush buried there. But actually dig the hole, push the stuff in. So
how old is it, Ron?
It's relatively new. It was probably it's all probably cut within the year.
Oh no, so there's no. It won't show up now. It takes a while for it to decay.
Yeah, I'd also say that that second stump dump that he's putting onto his property, the person that was doing the excavation work said that there was a layer of, sort of, he noted it as a clay material. So I don't know if that will hold water more and could cause any, would that cause the stumps to rot out at a different rate and you would have that problem? I'm not, I don't know, I don't know much about that. So I just want to throw that piece of information out, but that is on his property.
My problem is somebody didn't do their homework and put us in a pickle.
Yeah.
That's as simple as it is. Somebody could have avoided it by doing their homework. And I don't want to assume that somebody did that on purpose, right? Or maliciously assuming, or, I'm just going to be a little bit casual with that property line, knowing nobody's going to worry about it the next 20 years. But fact of the matter is that we are now in a position that may cause us to incur costs down the road if we don't take action today. At least getting some records in place, getting some things lined up today. We know now, that property could be sold to another owner, and we're losing track of who the contractor was that did the work. The proof may get lost, evidence may get lost. So I do think we need to, as far as the MVD staff goes, I think we need to reach out in writing to the property owner and make it very clear that this property line is MVD property. We need to make it very clear that trespassing and usage of that land is not acceptable. And not just because we're trying to be difficult, but I mean, this is a public water supply, right? And I'm not a specialist to assess whether or not we have to take any action on taking any measurements or doing any further probing in the area. Somebody else needs to advise that, but I'm concerned that we're going to be incurring costs 20 years down the road or 10 years down the road. And we have nobody to go after for that.
And the other thing too is we probably only got 3 years to act on this now that we know about it, right?
That's right. Yep, you got it. That's right.
So
We're making a lawyer over here yet.
we go after the lumber guy, because obviously he made money off the wood, cutting down the trees, and have them take the stumps off our property.
I would agree.
We something to do something in that group.
I would agree.
I'm assuming we're not burying our own stumps in the project on our property, right? Are those going to be taken off site somewhere?
We typically say to take them off site. On the case of well 4 and 5, we had the contractor take them off site, and he actually brought it back to his pit in Antrim. So that's typically what we do. Yeah, we don't want to bury stumps on a well site.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about this. I mean, he outlined a spot for you. How do we know how good that is? I mean, this thing could be 3 times the size. It could be all kinds of stuff buried in there. You can always, wonder what's worse than what he said. If there's stuff worse out there, I wouldn't have mind his encroachment onto the property if he's just using it for a backyard. That doesn't bother me as much as knowing that
I agree.
there's a stump dump there that's
agree.
concerning. I mean, I had a stump dump in my backyard and it settled, and now there's a big hole in the ground over there. And, that's why do we have to be bothered with this problem?
Yeah,
like you said, the guy made money selling the wood that was cut down on our property, buried the stumps on our property. I don't know. I think I'm not happy about that. I'm worried about the future potential repercussions of this. You got an infiltration basin over there that's only 40, 50 feet away. Who knows if some of the side slopes there are going to start exposing that stump dump, and we're going to have to deal with it as extra material to haul away and replace and all that stuff. And we're not going to really know about that until a couple years from now. So we're not going to have time to go back to him if it's a problem in the future. If that 3 year, we're not quite we're pressing against that 3 year limitation.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a tough one. I on one hand, I want to, tell him to get it out of there, take his stumps back. But then what does it really help us if he just buries it 30 feet away on his property? Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this need a town approval for a stump dump or something? I think I don't know in New Hampshire, but I know in Massachusetts you certainly do. And I don't know if he should be getting approval to do his own stump dump on his own property when it's essentially right outside of our wellhead area, sanitary protective circle. I don't know if stump dumps are a prohibited use in a wellhead protection area. I could see how they could be. So maybe there's a case for no stump dumps to be around here at all.
You can't put a stump dump inside your sanitary radius. Now, you don't know, sometimes you may have some that you don't know exist, but that would not be an acceptable practice. I mean, I know you didn't ask me, but I will offer my 2 cents. I think you're right that we need to establish a record right away. There needs to be an interview with the landowner from someone from MVD, basically, that says we need you to recognize. There should be a letter, as Wolf said, I think, that goes out from the MVD that says we understand now that you've encroached on our property. There's a stump dump there. We are unsure as to whether that causes or will be a threat to our groundwater quality. However, we need to put you on record that it is something that we're not in favor of, and that there's going to need to be additional pursuit in understanding what the size is, the depth, the materials, and maybe there's a couple of probes to determine it. I just think it has to have we got to start with a record. That's got to be the established point.
My problem about this is we're being approached by contractors left and right. Hey, can you do this? Can you waive that fee? And, can we make some kind of deal? And here we are being asked to ignore where MVD rights have been, I don't want to say violated, it's a little extreme, but they have certainly, been
Infringed upon.
affected here, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And again, I mean, we already, as an organization, we already have to cough up the costs for damages others have imposed on us. And I don't want to keep doing that again. Certainly not under my watch. I don't want to have to tell somebody a couple of years from now that we should have responded to that and should have done something about it, because now we have a lead contamination. Who knows if somebody used it as a shooting range, right? That little amount of dirt there and buried all kind of lead in there. We don't know that.
Yeah.
So,
I'd like to at least maybe talk to the legal counsel and see if there's a way we can maybe get them to agree that if there's any problem that arises from this in the future, even after the 3 years of statute of limitations is passed, is there a legal way to get them to agree to addressing that issue if it becomes an issue in the future? We got to make them remove that stump dump if it's a problem in the future. I don't know if that's possible to do that.
Yeah, would you have to put a lien on the property, so in case he's, if you had some agreement with him and he turns around and sells it,
Right.
you would have to do something, that the council will be able to tell you what you can do on that.
Right.
Wouldn't it be better to where, we'd like to look at like maybe a year of this or even less, right?
Oh, no, the stump dump's only 2 months old.
2 months old?
The trees were cut down within the year.
So wouldn't it be better to push it now to get them removed before there's any possible damage?
Yeah,
I agree.
would.
They're on the MVD property. They weren't authorized. They're in the wrong.
Right.
We shouldn't wait. We should make them remove it as soon as possible.
That's a good
call
point.
it a day. You're right.
I was under the impression this thing's been around forever, but I guess this is since we've been out there walking around. And ironically, we were out there trying to find a location so we're not being obtrusive to his backyard. We're finding out that his backyard is on our property and is a stump dump. So
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is about 160 feet by
it's about
80 feet.
75.
There's 140 feet by 80 feet or something like that got cleared there. I mean, that's considerable.
Oh,
No,
clearing.
it's not that big,
No?
Wolf.
He's talking
No.
about the clearing.
The
Yeah,
clearing,
you
yeah.
look at the bottom. I think it's about 70 by 15.
Yeah, but the clearing, Peter. He's talking
The clearing.
about the clearing.
Oh, clearing. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
All right,
Yeah.
so how many trees is that? You're talking about,
Not a clearing. Yeah.
you're talking about 100 trees easily?
Well, you can see the dent on this drawing. You can actually see the marking. So we actually had the surveyor, because there wasn't a ton of trees out there. So you can see sort of the density of the trees that were left. So that's about what was there.
Right.
Mm. All right,
So I'd
that's
say it
helpful.
was probably more in the 20 to 25 range of trees
Yeah.
or something they cleared, yeah.
So
That's
maybe we
the
send
case.
them, maybe we send them a letter, tell them to remove the stump dump, and when it gets removed, that we want someone out there inspecting that he's got all of it out of there or something.
Yeah, we want to have witness there. Yeah, we definitely want to see if something gets dug up.
Like you said, why are we setting a precedent and letting somebody get away with something where we're making contractors pay fees that we institute? You know, it's,
And there's a potential for it could affect well too. So let's be proactive and get it out of there before we get in a situation where it's harmful.
right, right.
And it wouldn't be a bad idea, as you mentioned, Don, you know, are there regulations for that? I don't know if there's any local regulations for stump dumps. And if there is, I doubt he got that for the other stump dump that he put on his property, you know, so that would be,
Right.
you know, something you might want to look at to have them, you know, dig those out too, you know?
Right, right.
I can look into that as far as permitting and what they need to do to have a stump dump.
Yeah, and especially in a wellhead protection area. I know it's not the sanitary protective radius, but it's definitely in a wellhead protection area, right? A WAPA.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's an outlawed use. I mean, that covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of acreage in that WAPA, but you know, it doesn't make me feel any better if it's 30 feet on the other side of his property line. It's still in the drainage pattern of the well here, so it's still an issue. Even his own stump dump on his own property might be just as much of a concern as this one is.
Right, and that's why I like, you know, Don, your point is well taken, and I think Pete, if you got to find out if there is a regulation in town. I'd be surprised if there's not a requirement to get in and to have a stump dump. I mean, I don't know.
It's probably like a regulation, but whether it's followed consistently, that's
I don't
another
know.
question, but that doesn't.
Might be
that
a
doesn't make
size
it
limit
right.
to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways,
All right. So what do we agree on this? Should we make an action item out of this? All right. So, Jill, you said you were going to try and look into the regulations to see if there's a regulation for a site designation for a stump dump.
Yeah, I'll just get in touch with the town and say, if I was going to want to put in stump dump, what do I have to do? And just get the whole process.
Right. And maybe you can find out if they do have stump dump permits or whatever they call them. Is there one for the stump dump that's being built now on his property?
Yep.
Or either one of these stump dumps ever been brought to the town's attention? I bet probably not.
I would think the stump dump that's on MVD property, even if he got a permit, it's invalid because it's not his property.
Right, right. So maybe we find out what the regulations entail, and then maybe revisit this and see if we want to send a letter to have him remove that stump dump, or and possibly both of them, depending on what the regulations are, if there are any. You guys feel appropriate? Okay. I mean, you know, we're not building this pump station tomorrow, so. But I do agree, we don't, you know, if the time is right and the earthwork is happening out there now, it's probably better not to wait too long on this. Unless you guys want to try to think about getting a letter drafted and having it circulated maybe for the next meeting or something to see if we want to propose sending this guy a letter and just telling him to remove this particular stump dump. Maybe we can have that letter ready for the next meeting, and we'll kick it around then again, and we'll have more information on all of the stump dumps. Is the other one an invalid stump dump as well? And if so, maybe we can ask him to remove the one that's on our property and also consider removing the one that's on his property. If the town hasn't permitted it.
We can find out. I'm not aware that there's a permit process for it, but we can find that out.
Yeah. Okay.
We can certainly get a letter started for the next meeting as well.
Okay. So let's do that. I'd say at a minimum, I'd like to send him a letter to tell him to remove the stump dump on MVD's property. And we'll determine what we want to do with the stump dump that's on his own property. If it's legally put there, then there's probably nothing we can do about it. But I think the one that's on our property is clearly, I mean, that's clearly a violation. And I kind of agree with Ken and Wolf, what do we gain by waiting? We're only risking here, right? And I don't see why we want to at least ask him to remove the stump dump. If he refuses to, well, then we've got something in writing, or we've at least approached him and tried to do it cordially to begin with. I think is important, and see how that goes. I guess I don't know if you guys feel the same way or not, but that's my opinion. All right, so you want to talk about the two proposed locations, move on to that next or something? You probably got other stuff you want to go over?
Oh, actually, yeah, I this drawing, I grabbed it to show you the stump dump, and I meant to grab the other drawing that did not show the proposed building location number 2. So we're at building location number 1, and we're proceeding with that. So,
all right. I thought that was what I recollected. I didn't know if there was a reason you were reconsidering.
Yeah, no, I was
location number 2 again.
I was playing around with the I'm learning how to do this PDF editor, and I was playing around, I think, with the original one that had just one building shown. But when I did some stuff with the PDF, I couldn't delete it. So then I, had to delete it and pulled up another one, and I ended up pulling up the one that had both of the buildings shown on it. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I'm learning all this new technology. Struggling.
Out of here.
But we're definitely looking at the one on the upper part of the hill there, not close down by the well. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you're not really making much more progress on that site design right now? Is there other things?
We're working on it right now. I think at the next meeting, we'll be able to show you where we stand on that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we'll have some, we're working on it right now, so we'll have a better idea of that. And we're trying to, work with the sub-consultants on building size and all that kind of stuff, and refine that, a little bit better. So see if we can, get that footprint, cut down a little bit if we could.
And you're going to keep in mind, if we find another well source in the Natticook Brook corridor, that we can run over to here on how we're going to be able to expand that building if necessary.
That's what we're planning on, having that in our back pocket too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then we're holding off on the proposed leach field design, because we want to that can get reviewed through the state within a week. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and lay out this building, get all this stuff done, get our 60% done, get comments back from you on that, and then if we need to make some modifications, we can. So my thought on that is you can't go too much to the southwest of the building. We possibly could add on some of that, but then once you start pushing out that area, you start going down the slope.
Right.
I want to look at, okay, so do we extend the building in that direction, or do we actually extend it in a northwesterly direction and then shift the road over along with that addition? So we're looking at those two different options. But we also, if we are going to shift in the northwest direction, we can't go too far to impact that existing water line, or we need to move that. So we're going to be looking at those types of things to see what what space we might need for that. And then also I wanted to leave that space sort of in between the proposed infiltration basin and the leach field. If there happened to be a need to construct a separate building, I wanted to have sort of that in our back pocket that we could fit into that. So I want to keep that leach field try to keep that as far away from the building as we can, reasonably as far away, I should say.
So that should be a pretty small leach field, right? Because what are we sewering? Just one bathroom, basically? We're not doing analyzers and any other discharge.
The analyzers we have been sending to that same area too, yeah. So like on well 4, we have the analyzers going to that, and we also to the sewer, that is, and we also had like the eye wash going to that. So maybe on this one, we have some of the eye washes and stuff like that could potentially have chemical in it. We can have that go to a holding tank that can be pumped out.
So how far is the sewer? There's none in Berry Road?
I don't believe there's any in Berry Road, and I don't believe Lynette mentioned this that we looked at. I don't remember it, but even on Amherst Road, there's no sewer. Would you know more about that, Ron? Do you know?
There's no sewer in Amherst Road. The closest would be
Turkey Hill?
no. I just lost my train. What's that?
Really, no sewer. Huh?
From Berry. I think Joey wrote stuff in mine. Also Joey.
Further down Amherst Road.
It's your actually last left before you hit Turkey Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, if it was close like this, I was gonna ask you about doing a pump and just pump it into there, but.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, if it was out on Berry Road, it's like, okay, we could, it makes sense instead of doing a leach field,
right,
spending a little extra money and getting it out there, and even looking at what's the size of that to possibly be pumping backwash, to it,
yeah.
if they approve it in the future. But right now, that doesn't seem like an option, and so it looks like we're gonna have to do all on site, similar to what well 7 and 8 is.
Yeah. Okay.
There is sewer up on Joe Allen. Yeah. I know there's work down the Amherst Road, but that may have just been drainage.
Yeah, that's quite a run to get even out to Amherst Road is.
Yeah.
That's going to be a lot more costly than just doing a leach field, I'm sure. So.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then this pavement, there's this line here that you show around the sort of the eastern side of the building. Is that what was going to be designated as a limit of pavement that you were thinking about?
Yeah, if you see where that is sort of like a 20-foot wide road that goes down to building location number 2,
Yeah.
so that's gone. Okay, but then the other pavement limit that is, it's roughly, that was an idea we had, and we're working on that, trying to define what we might need for that, and that certainly could be cut down if we need to.
Yeah, it was looking pretty excessive. I mean, it looks like it's even more than 40 feet.
Yeah, so the only thing is, so if we had to get tanker truck in here and out of here. So that's what we are looking at is being able to run a tractor trailer truck around that. Then the option is, okay, so how much do you do in pavement? How much do you do in gravel? And if you leave the outside as gravel where the tractor trailer truck has to turn, that might be tough for them to turn. So that's something we can certainly, once we get this building laid out and we get some turning radiuses on there for the trucks that we think are going to be going out there, we can, bring that to you and show you what we have and all that kind of stuff, and we can make good decisions.
Okay. I'm good with that. Anybody else have questions on well 2? Or you have any more to talk about or not?
I'm all set on well 2 right now.
All right. So if there's no more questions, I guess the next item on the agenda was the Turkey Hill booster progress.
Just a quick one. There's not a lot new, and there is site work still going on, and the foundation's being prepped and the retaining walls being prepped, but it's all in anticipation of the station itself being delivered. So it's tracking, it's on schedule, and I know I think it's happened since the water main break happened since the last meeting, but and I think we're working right now to sort out if there's any associated costs with that. But that's something I don't think we have any information on, but we may be approaching you on that if there is some. So there's not, that's about it right now. It's but it is making progress.
Okay.
The only other thing I had in terms of Underwood stuff is in your packet. There's a timeline, and it was just for FYI, and I only want to draw your attention to it because it's just something we've been maintaining, but we've finally prettied it up a little bit. If it's a tool you like, we can update it. If there's comments or edits you want to make, let us know. But it is kind of a nice little snapshot of the beginning of time, the beginning of PFAS time to today.
That was great.
Yeah. So if there's other things on there that you'd like to track, just let us know. We can keep that thing current.
Okay. Yep, that looks good. So I guess other than that, does anybody have any other questions for Underwood? Or because I think maybe at this point, if you guys are done with your part, I don't know if you want to hang around anymore, or you can.
I'm going to listen into the first couple parts of Jamie's talk, but I'll just mute and listen.
All right. So any other questions on Turkey Hill booster from anybody? If not, then we can move on to Jamie and talk about, there's a few things to go over with Jamie. First one is the Natticook Brook exploration results.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, is it all right if I share my screen with you guys?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Let's just do this real quick. Can you see my screen?
No. I don't see it.
All right, hang on a second. I'm gonna bring this over. See if you can see it now. Can you see it?
There we go.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So thanks for letting me be a part of this. As you recall, you had authorized us to go out and do some geophysical surveys. The surveys that we did, we started over on the area next to MVD 1, and we also did some surveys. These blue lines here represent the survey lines that we actually did across the area. The existing well 1 is located here, and here's your current structure and building. This is the atrium piece over here. Let me just show you the other one that I want to, I think I can see this one.
We have 2, 3, 4.
I'm going to bring the next one over. This is the well 3 area where we conducted geophysical surveys. Also on the western side of the pond and of course in the eastern side of the pond to see if we could identify a location away from MVD 3. To show you the oops. Come across here. So I want to show you a little bit about this is a LiDAR imagery that shows you the test well locations that we identified up near well number 1. And the circles here are the 400 foot protective radiuses. This piece of property is what you own, Merrimack Village District owns. Can you see my cursor?
Not well.
Not well. Okay. Then over here is Watkins compound, the condo association, and then of course down in here is the atrium piece. So one of the things, I'm not going to show you all the geophysical surveys, but I think it's worthy of kind of giving you a sense of what we do. we had done the profiles, and this is line 4. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Line 4 was the geophysical line that came from the northwest to the southeast down towards the production well number 1. And this is the hill. You own this piece of property. You own this piece of property as well. This is the hill that is sitting way up on top. And we see a very significant drop in the bedrock surface. This is essentially the bedrock surface here. And we decided to drill TW1A. Again, it's on your piece of property, but first, before we drilled at this site, with the hope that this was a shadow image that we weren't quite sure about. We drilled that well today. As you may be aware, that well turned out to be, I think, 60 feet deep and had really good, pretty good material between 45 and 60. Tomorrow, we're going to start drilling on 1B, which we think will be deeper. And the hope is that, we're going to drill 4 or 5 test wells across the region, but I wanted to give you a sense of what we're looking at when we do our geophysical surveys. This area up here is unsaturated sand and gravel deposits. The blue area is what you consider to be, this unsaturated really starts from about right there, and everything in the blue is saturated. And this is actually bedrock, likely to be the bedrock surface to the west as you go further up on the northwest portion. So it gives you a sense too that this is the Natticook. This is a actual fault zone. So that Natticook Brook zone that valley that goes up and down from the pond from well 3 and all the way up is probably fault controlled, and this is what we think is the symbol. What we see from the geophysics is about 250 feet below grade that we're looking at. So really kind of very encouraged I am about the results of this. I want to go back a little bit here. I could go through all the profiles. I can show you these different profiles that we did, where we can see different features that we were interested in. Here's another one, a little bit more convoluted, where this is 2B, where we're looking at drilling over on the atrium piece, but the one that I showed you is a little bit more easy to see. This I wanted to show you because 4B is about where the MVD 1 site was. And you can see that there's a fair amount of sand and gravel there, but again, it's going to be in the 50-foot range of what we're thinking of developing. And we're not going to go there at this point, but I did want you to see these profiles. They're pretty cool. So going back here, we've identified, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on this side, and then 10 on the other side. Our intention right now is to drill. We've drilled 1. We're going to drill 1B. We'll likely drill 2A or 2B depending upon access. We've got permission from Atrium to drill both of those. And then, depending on what we decide to do or what we see there, we're going to probably move over. Oops. I lost that other figure. Hold on a second. Sorry. Here we go. We're going to move over to this, down to the south, and drill probably 6. 6 gives us a 400-foot protective radius. It's about 800 feet away from MVD 3. And it is in an area that we think has some potential groundwater availability. 7 is over on the town of Merrimack's property. I can't remember, Jill, if we've got permission to drill on the town land yet or not.
No, Ryan just went out and staked it. So Ron and I took a walk out on Thursday, so we can explain to the town where it is.
Okay.
Enter the town this week.
The nice thing about this site, if we're not really too confident that it's going to be favorable. But the nice thing about this site is it's separated by the pond. It's a good long distance away from 3. but we know we have a geologic boundary that exists on this side because we're starting to see bedrock on the western edge of that, actually near the town of Merrimack property boundary that runs northeast, southwest. So that's not nearly as favorable as 6, and 6 is, has some concerns too. So we're focusing right now on the sites that are up in the north. You can see MVD2 is a significant distance away, but there probably will be some interference between the 2 and 1, but this would be a better site, and we're believing that if we drill or replace well 1 with let's say 4B or 4A, that because that well has been abandoned, that they're going to treat that as a new water supply source, and that means we'd have to go through the large groundwater withdrawal permitting process again. We will have to anyways with any of the other sites. It wouldn't be considered, we were hopeful that maybe it would consider just as a replacement well, and we could diminish the overall public hearing process and everything else that goes along with it. But right now, we have enough money to be able to, depending on how long it takes us to drill, about 4 to 5 test wells. And we're letting the results of this dictate each of the next sites. But I wanted to get your opinion, the commissioner's opinion, as to how hard you want me to push for a well over next to well 1 to replace the old well, or is that something you'd rather pursue other options first and leave that as the last option?
What do you think has a chance for a better yield? Probably the test well 1A, B, or C.
Well, I think probably it'll be 1B and maybe 2B. Those are going to be those are going to be pretty good, but we haven't tested 1A yet. It was very well sorted material, very well sorted sand deposits, medium to coarse sands, and they're favorable.
Yeah.
So we may have gotten lucky. I wanted to go to the bottom of the hill to see if I could actually get a little bit more material. I have to drill. The downside about drilling up on a hill is you got to drill through unsaturated material to get to what you want, right? But we can't really drill in the east of it. Ideally, I'd love to drill out here, but it's just too wet to get a drill rig out there. So, but this is nice because you own all this property, and for the most part on B, I mean, we can almost get we can get the 400 protective radius without, even though Watkins Glen, it goes on to Watkins Glen, Priest, that is non-developable, so we could get a waiver for that 400-foot protective radius with no problem.
Right.
And I think we could do the same with 1A. Now, going down to Atrium is also a possibility. This is an area that's not well used. They are thinking about doing some gravel excavation down there in the future. So that would have to be discussed, but even if we don't develop a well, having a well there for monitoring purposes is going to be essential. So I think that we've got a decent plan there. So right now we're planning on drilling all week, evaluating what we have, reassessing and making a determination as to what we have remaining in the drilling budget, and then possibly have them come back for one more well or 1 or 2 more wells. And then we'll wrap that up and provide you with a report with the recommendations. But I wanted you to be fully aware of where we're at, and I think we've made pretty good progress.
So if you're looking at test well 3, which is on the opposite side of the brook, would that possibly be less of a chance of having salt impacts if we're on the other side of that brook, perhaps, if we think the salt is coming from, the Continental Road Industrial Drive side?
We might have a little bit more protection. The land ownership becomes more complicated because of it being in an association.
Right.
So Atrium seems to be pretty clean, but I mean, the thing is, I think it's probably worthy of putting the test well in there to get in there to see if we have a better water quality. Because what we're going to be doing is, once these wells are in, they're 2-inch test borings, we'll pump them, and then we'll take some water quality data and give an estimate of what the yield is.
Now, are you able to just to pump the test well itself, or how do you record the drawdown?
Yeah, we pump the test well itself. Yeah.
Is it a suction pump? Suction
vacuum suction. We can do either a vacuum suction because the water table will be high. On 1B, because the water table will be low, we'll have to put a pump in it.
Okay.
So none of the test wells that you drilled so far have been investigated as far as water quality, right?
No, well, we just started drilling this morning.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And in fact, that well isn't even constructed yet. We just drilled it, and it'll be constructed tomorrow morning.
But all of these will eventually be subject to testing?
The ones we drill. Now, we've got 10 wells sited. We'll probably drill 4 to 5 of these. We won't have enough money to drill all of them.
Okay.
But I am encouraged by that geophysical survey that I showed you. Those are pretty good. Those are pretty good data. It's kind of like a primo example of how well electrical resistivity can work in an unconsolidated aquifer environment, and get to see the bedrock. Because one thing I want to share with you is this linear feature that goes up through Natticook Brook watershed is all fault controlled. So I can show on other profiles the fault that we picked up as we crossed it. It's pretty cool from a geologic standpoint, if you like that kind of thing. So that's where we're at. I don't know if there's any other questions, but that kind of summarizes what we're doing, and pretty encouraged about it.
What is that somewhat pronounced structure here on the right of MVD1?
Yeah, that is something we can't get our head around. It looks like it's a storm drain of some sort, but we have not unraveled why that is there. It does stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
It's out in the middle of the wet
outlet. I think that's an outlet of a storm drain, right, Ron?
I believe that's the outlet or the overflow to the retention pond that's at the top of the hill.
Oh, is it?
On Atrium property, I believe that's the outfall.
Wow.
Overflow.
Okay.
Interesting.
It did look like a storm drain kind of feature.
I was hoping we found some aliens or something.
It's a buried ark.
Right.
All right. Anything else on that?
No. So 1A, you said it was like they got to 50 feet?
59, 60 feet.
60 feet. Is that the same depth as the old well one?
No, I think the old well was 50 or 53 or something like that.
Okay, I was just curious. Does that necessarily mean it'd be like the same yield, you think, or could you potentially yield more than?
Well, I don't know what the materials were in MVD1, but these materials are pretty good. But I won't know what the specific yield would be until I get some kind of a test on it. But I do think that 1B will have greater saturated thickness, and that will probably be more productive at the end of the day. It's a long way in there, we got to come down along this way to get to it. But
in being that close, like 1B being that close to MVD2, you think it's potential that we could replace all of well 3 from there, or do you think that would be? And I know it's a lot that.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking that we would need 2 production wells maybe to replace well 3 at the end of the day. But I don't want to say that until we've got a couple more test borings in. But I think that probably we would end up having 2 sites. So I'm thinking that, if 1A or 1B works out, and then 2A or 3, or possibly, well 6, whatever that well was down below. Yeah, well 6. I mean, if 7 came out, that would be awesome, but I don't have a lot of confidence in it. But I may just drill it just to put it to bed in my own brain. But these others are more favorable for sure. 7 is 7 because they're labeled kind of in their general priority. So let's see. Any other questions?
If not, then you can proceed. I think we had,
Well 4, we've kind of talked about. Peter did indicate that well 4, we're waiting on the screen, and I think that's moving in the right direction.
right.
Results of testing 6. Let me see if I can find these things here. Shoot. Testing 6 was interesting. Here's the results of testing 6. We went out there and put a pump in it. These are the PFAS results for 6. And ironically, we found PFOA at 29. These are comparisons 6, 7, and 8. 6 had 29 PFOA, 2.9 PFAS, 19 P in 17, and 16 in 8. But it's higher in PFOA. It's higher in PFAS. It's higher in our PFAH excess. And generally speaking, it had higher levels. Now, it is it's essentially a grab sample. So we went out and pumped it for a period of a few hours at I think around 50 gallons a minute. If we were to pump well 6 and drive more water from around the perimeter of the site, we would see that that probably would diminish overall, but it didn't bode well for me to see that we had a starting point that was higher. We also looked at the sodium and chloride and hardness, arsenics, and iron and manganese. Iron was low, manganese was low, sodium was pretty high, and so were chloride. So we would have to, again, those are probably going to go down significantly if we pump that like we did before at 400 gallons a minute for say 24 or more than that, maybe 72 hours. I would be pretty confident that those numbers would all start dropping. But that's what we have in the short-term sampling event that we collected. So at this point, I guess what this points to me is says, all right, our better option still is to be looking for a replacement up at Natticook Brook if possible, and continue to keep this in our back pocket to look at down the road. Because I know we did a UEI and EGGI did a study a while ago on blending of the two wells. There's a letter report that's going to be coming out your way that kind of summarizes the old study that we did. So that, because I know most of the board members outside of maybe Joe weren't around when we did that testing program, but we were able to determine that we could reduce 1,4-dioxane, which is what we were most concerned about, to a level that was acceptable when we blended with 7 and 8. But because we would be blending 7 and 8 with, and in this case, we'd have to blend 7 and 8 after treatment's put in to get the get the PFAS down. So if this PFAS dropped down to say half under long-term pumping conditions, and then you blended it 2-to-1 with 7 and 8, then you'd be down, if you're accepting some PFAS in the water, then this would certainly be below the drinking water standards. And it is a high yield well. This well can pump 1,000 gallons a minute. I mean, this is a monster well.
So you just detected that dioxane in March
So this was just done, right?
and it's just barely over. It's 0.34 versus
0.32, yeah.
0.32.
It was over 0.32. Yeah, you're right, Don. That's 0.34.
Right. Yeah, I still think we would probably want to. I think we were looking for non-detect PFAS, so I think we'd have to filter that in somewhere in our,
Yeah, so if that's the case, then this would be, out of the question at this point.
right, because then you'd be talking about another expansion to well 7 and 8 after we do this one.
Right. Or you're going over to the property to the north.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking at well 6 for potential, if it didn't have the iron and manganese problem that well 7 and 8 have, is maybe if this replaces well 7 or 8 for some reason, and then maybe we would be able to free up one of the existing green sand vessels. I don't know. It sounds like it's a lot of retrofit stuff though, but
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we had said if it doesn't have iron manganese, if it doesn't have sodium issues, it would be possible for us to basically pump well 6 into 7 and 8 treatment system. And since we're adding GAC filtration there and have green sand filtration in place already, the idea was that we can maybe replace well 3 with well 6, basically.
Right.
But that doesn't look very promising then.
Well, at this point, I think, we got what we wanted, and that's some data. And I think the data suggests that this should stay as a back burner for the moment.
Right.
Until we get the results, as to what we're doing out in well 3 area.
But it goes to show you that the sodium chloride is really the next beast we have to tackle.
Absolutely. And, it's that parking lot that's, over by the shopping mall that's across the way. That's, I think, is part of the discussion point, and all the impervious covers that are treated in that region. It just continues to push us in that direction, which is what I want to talk about tonight.
yeah, because the sodium and chloride at 6 that you detected is quite a bit higher than sodium and chloride that we got at well 7 and 8. So I was surprised to see that.
Right. Well, and I think, it is probably these numbers, I think, Don, are probably elevated beyond what they actually are, because when we pump them, we're getting the maximum contaminant level. Because when we start pumping it at a harder rate, we're going to start seeing recharge come from 360 degrees around that well that goes out further into the wetland and out in the swamp. And you're just going to capture more or water that has less sodium and chloride.
Okay.
So, and one of the things that's interesting, and I'm going to talk about this in the next section on the water quality monitoring program. And Peter, this may be of interest to UEI too. One of the things we're finding is that the iron and manganese 4, 7, and 8 go up the harder we pump these. And the reason for that is because when you pump these wells harder, they put more strain on the wetlands, and you get a reducing environment, and the iron wants to go into solution, right? So here's a well that's not being pumped hard in the same aquifer that 7 and 8 are, and the iron and manganese is essentially non-existent, right? But when you put when you have to pump the 7 and 8 as hard as you have, since 4 and 5 are not on, my view is that we're going to see, once 4 and 5 come on and we can reduce the actual demand on 7 and 8, that iron and manganese will be diminished in 7 and 8. We know that happens with well 3, that during the summertime, the iron and manganese gets elevated as the recharge from the pond gets reduced. So I just wanted to point out that this iron and manganese here in well 6 under non-pumping conditions is pretty doggone low. So I'm hopeful that as we take the strain off of 7 and 8 with 4 and 5 going back online, that you're going to start seeing some diminishment, because you will not put the strain on the wetland, that you won't have as much iron going into solution, because you're going that reducing environment, that front that is what we're dealing with, is going to be diminished. So that's my scientific hope for all. All right, so that's well 6. I don't know, any more questions on that before I move on?
I'm okay. Everybody else all right? I guess you can move on.
Okay. Let's see.
So the next thing on the agenda was review of the report for the groundwater quality monitoring data.
Yeah, let me see if this is it. No, that's not it. Shoot, what do I do with this? Oh,
That's the
it's
next one.
That's not it. Had a lot up here and I just can't. Sorry, guys.
All right.
Why is this not it? Well, I'm going to go to a different source. Sorry. Let me go. Okay. All right. So, sure why I can't. Let's put this down. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Slide that over. So one of the things that's interesting about this data that we collected is that, and I just want to mention, let me see if this is well too. So we're seeing, we've seen some sodium and chloride rise in well 2 a little bit, not so bad, but we also see the hardness is increasing, particularly in well number 3. That's another thing we haven't really talked about that, but we've talked about sodium and chloride, PFAS, iron and manganese, but hardness has also been increasing in well 3 over its use. And I think the bottom line is that hardness is also related to the salting of the roads, or the application of sodium and chloride. And I think that's probably interesting to note that as the chloride levels have been rising, so has hardness. So we're going to have to it's probably going to be another benefit that we haven't really talked about, is if we reduce the sodium and chloride levels in these wells, we're going to start seeing some reduced hardness. And the hardness is largely the result of calcium and magnesium in the groundwater, which is associated with the de-icing products that are there. So I just want to point that out as kind of, if you were to think about anything there, that's one thing that we get a takeaway. And again, as I mentioned about the well 6, is that the iron and manganese, I'm going to go to the conclusions here just real quick, that the iron and manganese, we believe, there's a lot of material in here. If I just kind of read this thing, that the intermittent changes in the level of iron and manganese in the wells, well 3 and 7 and 8, are the result of the proximity to surface water and wetlands in both wells 3 and the 7 and 8. This natural condition is going to continue indefinitely, but the overall concentrations of dissolved iron and manganese can be partially mitigated by reducing the groundwater production withdrawals from these wells periodically. This is going to be easier to manage with wells 4 and 5 offline, or online, excuse me. And I just want to I should highlight that in yellow, but that's probably the biggest takeaway that I want everyone here to get. We did see in the plots, I can show you some of the plots that you are aware of. One thing on the recharge, the precipitation, what we've been measuring since 2015. If you remember, 2015, this is a graph of the amount of rainfall that occurs compared to normal. So this would be your normal rainfall. Anything that's to the right of that curve is a shortage in rainfall. So you remember we had our drought in 2016. You can see how much of a drought we actually had in terms of comparison to normal years. Same as this. Here in 2017, we're pretty much on average across the board. In 2018, we're slightly above average. In 2019, in 2019, we're slightly above average. So in the 5 years we've been monitoring this, we've had 2 drought years. We've had 1 dead on average year, and we've had 2 years that are just slightly above average. So I think for your tenure as commissioners, you know, you're seeing a kind of like a full range of climatological conditions, which, you know, maybe we'll have something different this year. But I wanted to set the stage for the monitoring period because that does influence the water quality to a certain extent. I'm not going to go into these but this is where our monitoring wells are and what we did for our, if you remember, our salt mitigation plan. We put a map together that I presented at our last meeting. Let me skip through those. Those are all of our maps. But here's the, here's the well 2. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to share with you is that you can see that the sodium and chloride has continued slightly been going up. This is the sodium, this is the chloride. But also, this is the hardness. So you can see the hardness on well 2 has been slightly going up, up from 30, to say up to 60. So that's something that's happened over the last 20, 30 years. And iron and manganese has been all over the place. Let me just go to another well, just for instance. This is the PFAS tables, and you've seen these before. That's all in this report, by the way. That was the annual report that was submitted last week or last month. I won't bore you to tears on this stuff, but you've seen these plots. Again, here's the hardness concentration, right? You see the sodium and chloride go up. You see the hardness go up. And there's no other reason but the applications of road salt that the hardness is going up as well. So just plant that. It's probably the first time in the state of New Hampshire that I've actually put those 2 correlations together. And I've been doing this a long time, but it just hit me over the head when we did this last report. So I won't go over the rest of it, the PFAS and so forth. I mean, you see MVD3, the PFAS has been pretty stable across the bottom. Let me go to 4 and 5 real quick. Well, 4 and 5 doesn't really matter. 7 and 8.
If you wouldn't mind going back to there's no page numbers. Well 4, the iron manganese chart.
Well 3 or
4.
Oh, 4? I didn't.
4.
I hadn't gotten there yet.
Really, just show it for a second.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's
one
sodium
more.
chloride. That's sodium chloride. Yep. That's hardness. Yep. And this is
iron manganese.
Iron and manganese. Yep.
When you look down there, starting 2000. No. Okay, that answers my question. I was wondering, is this raw water or is it after the filtration system? This is raw, right?
For well number 4.
What am I talking about? Forget about it.
Yeah, you have raw. It's just raw water. Yeah.
I was thinking. Yeah.
No, I get. Yeah, this.
Yeah, I was looking at 7. I was thinking for some reason that was 7 after the green sand filtration, and I was wondering, and then I saw the dates, and that didn't coincide with when we put the plant in place. So I wasn't sure if that was raw or filtered. But,
right. Yeah.
It's
fair enough.
So, sorry about that.
No worries. I just thought I'd go to 7 and 8 just real quick. I wanted to show. Let's just take a look at the PFAS here. That's so you see, look, you got 7 and 8 with the chlorides going up, and then coming down. We see that, and then of course the hardness. Guess what? Goes up, and the hardness comes down. So, just a fun fact, I guess. And the iron and manganese in 7 and 8. This is they have increased. And I think what you're going to see is when we start putting 4 and 5 on, we should start seeing this. If what I think is correct, we should start seeing this start to drop back, which should be good news for UEI and the treatment plant.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the water quality. I think I've got the 2 key takeaway points there. We want 4 and 5 on to help the water quality for 7 and 8, and we want to continue on with the salt mitigation program because that's going to help everywhere.
Jamie, just the one comment I had was I know you have some of these graphs, you have PFOA and PFOS combined, and I know that's what's in effect, I guess, as right now when the MCLs are still in limbo. But I think at some point we're going to want to have the PFOA separately, just so if assuming the MCL of 12 does come back as a true MCL, I think it's going to be good to show that where the PFOA falls, particularly on well 2, because I know sometimes it's been above, sometimes it's been below the 12 limit.
Well, we have just to be, we have plotted them separately. So that's the
all right, I see that.
Yeah. That's PFOA and PFOS for well 7. If I go to well 2, real quick.
I don't think I saw them for all graphs, unless I missed them.
Let me see real quick. Whoops. That's what you're asking about. That was the combined, yes. And I do have that separately, so I can produce that for you. And I think maybe, Don, too, one of the things we may want to do is to combine all 4 of the drinking water ones, just so you can see the total. So, have one more plot that says all 4 of the regulated are total X. And then, but I will separate, that's a good point. We'll separate out the PFO and PFOS for well 2.
Yeah, because really, if you look at the MCLs, the 4 PFAS compounds, it's really only PFOA that we ever are in violation of.
Right.
As far as I know, I don't think we've ever violated any other PFAS compound other than PFOA.
Right.
So I think it's definitely important to have that. I know you had some of those on some of the wells, so.
Right.
Because if these graphs are going to be used for other purposes too, to compare against that 12 MCL, then obviously it would be good to have the PFOA plotted individually.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Okay.
So the question though is, hang on.
Yep.
Am I muted? Didn't we have one well, and don't ask me which one, that had PFBA starting to show up?
I think so.
Right. And
which parameter?
PFBA, wasn't that the next one that's
PFBA?
First column.
Yeah, I have not plotted that, but if you want us to plot those, I could have them all plotted if you want.
Well, I figured those that are getting close to, any meaningful concentration, right? I mean, all of them are meaningful, but you know what I mean, closer to MCLs and that brings us close. I mean, PFBA is not regulated right now, but it's obviously a concern for some.
Right. The thing with PFBA though is that's the first thing to break through the carbon.
Exactly, and that's why I was wondering if it's maybe something that we want to keep an eye on, because obviously if that's going up, we need to maybe monitor our media monitoring, right?
Right.
Well, that was double monitoring, but you know what I mean.
But the four that are going to be regulated are PFNA, and then PFHXS, and then PFO and PFOS. Yep.
But we don't have the other ones, PFAS really in any.
Right, so if PFNA on 5, for example, has no detects right now, PFNA, which would be 11, excuse me, PFHXS, which is 11, that's at 5 anyways. Will be interesting to see what happens when we start pumping those wells, of course. So, point well taken. I think that's well worth it. Wolf, we'll break those out.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, before we move on, just something related. I don't know if anybody got back to you, but I was asking in the last meeting if someone can have you pull out the data for PFOA and some of the other PFAS compounds, but primarily PFOA for the Nashua Penachuk system that
Yeah.
we have our booster pump connected to, just to see where those levels have been in the history and kind of if they're going down, where they are now.
We went to One Stop, Don, to look for that data, and the data was not, all the data that we had showed very low levels, which we know that it wasn't going back to the pre-treatment process. So I think probably in order for me to get that information, I've got to reach out to Penachuk.
I think it was on DES's website a while ago. I haven't checked in several months.
Well, yeah, I had one of our guys look into it and we couldn't come up with the data.
Right.
But I can double check on that. But if you want me, I can reach out to John Beauvais and ask him for that pre-data. See if he would give it to us.
Yeah.
I thought Penachuk had it on the website.
I thought it was on the website because Brandon Kernan, I talked to him about it, and he told me to use the Penachuk treatment plant as what's representative of what's going in the distribution system. So it was on the DES's website because they used to submit all that information to DES.
Right.
Maybe I'll just look for the link. If I can find it again, I'll send it to you.
All right, I'll revisit that, and then if it's okay with you, I'll follow up with an email to you or Wolf on that, or whoever wants to.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Speak to the chair then, I guess, please.
Okay.
So if you want to make that an action item, Amanda, you can put that down for me to follow up on looking for those PFAS, PFOA results for the Nashua Penachuk system.
Oh.
Okay, and if it's okay, I'll go to the last item, which will probably take a little bit of time for conversation. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Let me just find that now. Okay. So what I did on this is to produce a change order for the existing salt mitigation project that we have and just add some additional work. So this essentially, just to refresh everybody's memory, we had task 1, which was conduct a meeting with selected stakeholders. We completed that. Provide input on the groundwater protection strategies for planning board consideration. We're going to review existing subdivision regulations, possible building and ground design protocols, review design buildings and grounds. We have really not gone into that detail. We were going to make a presentation to them, but we chose to do that all at once. But I've incorporated a budget to get involved with the planning board and the planning board staff, or the the town staff, to review some of these things and see if we can flush out any kind of possible changes that could be made on the planning board side to help us with the reduction of salt in applicants in the wintertime. Provide information to key property owners. If you remember, we had in our last conversation, talk about compiling a list of property managers in each of the zones that are what we call the sensitive or active recharge areas. Provide some educational materials for them and the winter management practices. but also talk to them individually and see to what extent they would be willing to work with us on reducing salt loads within the sensitive groundwater recharge areas. And so I put a price in for that. Review existing plow routes with the town and DOT. That would require us to meet with the DOT. Put that onto the agenda and go through the brine anti-icing pre-wetting operations and what they're, just make them talk to us. I didn't ask Ron and Jill this, and I should have, but the coordination with neighboring municipalities, I thought that would be something that could be completed by MVD, which would be including contacting the neighboring municipalities to encourage road salt application on local roads or reducing, develop a memorandum of agreement to establish low salt areas on sections of Route 3 that are in your wellhead protection area, and implement a system to track winter salt use by the town. That would be ideally broken down by plow route. So I think those are maybe things we can talk about, but I think they're worthy of at least, this may take a little bit of time, but while we're not in the salt application time period, and I know we're in a pandemic, which creates other issues, but I think we can start working with a memorandum or a discussion or a letter out to the municipalities to get the conversation started. And I think that could be done probably by MVD. And then task 6 was sent out a mailing with educational materials to inform all MVD customers about the problems associated with road salt. That was completed. I think it's probably something to be considered again, possibly coming up in the next, in the wintertime, and send out a second mailing. We presented an educational PowerPoint on sodium to the interested citizens and property owners. We generated a regional map of sodium and chloride levels, which I think was really, really helpful for me and for everybody else who's been looking at it. Where is our sensitive hotspots, which is going to, that task 8 map is going to be things that we present to, the stakeholders down in before. So I think that's really good. And then the last task, which is probably going to be the most expensive, it is the most expensive because I started working through what we need to do. But we need to start conducting meetings and discussions with top key level DES officials with selected, with whoever you want from the board and staff to establish a full alliance and support from DES. And I don't think it's inappropriate for us to actually reach out to the commissioner. I know this is, maybe be shooting a little bit high, but at the end of the day, I mean, I know the commissioner, we've had a number of conversations about and meetings about a variety of different issues as they relate to groundwater contamination. And, he may wish to wait until we've met with a couple of other people first, but I'm seeing this as a couple of meetings with the hydrogeologist at the state, some of the management at the state, and maybe at the level of political, at a higher level. So this is something that's going to take some time. And I just think that if I start presenting the data we've collected over, in the presentation materials, and I get that in front of some of the key DES leaders, we might be able to be led to some funding, and we might be able to be led to some support. And I think at this point, we talked about getting more support from the state, and that's the goal here. So I had put together my best estimate for what I consider to be the work that would be important to do. It's under $20,000. I thought it was cheap money for what we're trying to accomplish. But I'm open for any kind of conversation about that. And, this is going to be the next kind of what we've done and taking it to the next level.
Right.
Keep the momentum going.
So Jamie, I recall when you and I last discussed this at a previous meeting, I thought it was very important that we get DES involved to sort of, before, I want to get DES involved and meet with them, I think before we meet with any of the property managers, just so that if we get any feedback from DES, it might be a little bit more of a high level of priority when we meet with the property managers. And also DES, I was hoping DES would offer what they can assist us with, or what DES can assist the private property owners and property managers in whatever different kind of de-icing certifications and things like that. So I think it sounded when we spoke last that it made more sense to do task 9 first before we went with task, what was it, 4?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I failed to mention really that this is not in the order of what we would do
Right.
them at. I believe that this is the first thing we need to start with, and we work down. And I didn't know if you wanted to, how you wanted to approach this in terms of approvals or non-approvals, but I concur. We need to go to the state, and I think they can lead and provide us the roadmap, or at least help us define it.
Right. So is the 19,850, that's just the sum total of the tasks that you have numbers in here for, which
Correct.
is task 2, 3, 4, and 9,
Right.
basically, right?
Right.
Right. I don't see anything in here. I don't know if anybody really has I've been asking for this before. I even asked Kyle this, and I forget the one that was with Kyle that came to the meeting we had, but if there's a map that actually shows the no salt areas versus the low salt areas in town, and I don't think that there is a map. There's probably a list of streets or something, but I haven't seen really anything. So I don't know. It just, we're talking about all these different low and no salt restriction areas, and I really don't know where any of them are. So it seems like a very basic thing that we should start with that we don't have.
Well, that was what I had kind of listed as task 4. To review
Okay.
the existing plow routes with the town and DOT within all of the WAPAs to determine whether we could reduce the salt or no salt application.
Right.
And at that time, it's kind of just to confirm or make them commit to, what you're saying. And that is, what is it that what kind of expectations can we have for you to be applying salt in these regions or not? Because right. I think it's too gray right now. We really need to nail this down, because clearly we're seeing, what's happening is that we're seeing improvements in 7 and 8 because they have done reductions in salt load, and we're not seeing it in 3 and wells 2 and 3. So it's not that complicated. I mean, I just don't think, we shouldn't be. I'm hopeful that with the state support, whether it's a commissioner or others, that we can get the message down to DOT and continue to have positive discussions with the town about what they're doing to help us. I think if we can continue that, to push that down the road, I just don't want to take the foot off the pedal right now.
No, I don't either. And I think even trying to push the DES to say who is a contact that would be willing to work with us on this thing, and who can we put in contact with the property managers who are going to be asking questions about, well, if you guys don't want us to use salt, what else do we have to use? And I'd like to be able to have the answer to that, because otherwise, if they don't have something else that they can use or learn how to use it sparingly, they're just not going to follow any recommendation that we give them. If we just tell them they can't use salt, we got to train them, or at least point them to the right direction to what can they do without harming our aquifer.
Well, and I do think that they can do. I mean, if you remember my presentation, I had interviewed with the city of Dover, and Dover, because we do a lot of work with the city, and Bill Belanger, who runs that system, had won the salt, the Salty Award or whatever it's called from the state, who had come up with innovative ways to reduce the salt load in Dover. Dover has the same scenario as you do. They depend entirely on groundwater. Every drop of water they drink comes out of wells. So they're desperate to keep their salt loads down, and they've done a very good job in keeping. We don't have a salt problem in Dover, really, a significant, nothing like what we see here. And so I know that the practices that they're using up there with this brine, spreading, has been pretty effective. And so I think those are the kinds of things too that people can still use. We just got to get away from the salt piles that we see on the roads.
Right.
I mean, every time we see a salt, residual salt on the road, it says there's too much salt. I mean, if there's a salt that we can see everywhere after a major storm, 2 days after the snow's gone, there's too much salt. So we got to fix that.
Right.
So,
and I think it's important to reach out to the landowners too, with the large parking lots, the private landowners, because.
Right, which is task 3, which is what
Right.
I've got up there for task 3. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of salt coming from them too. So, we've got to, I know we got to hit both fronts, the applicators on the road, the public application, as well as the private application. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward on this. If anybody else wants to make a motion, feel free, or if you have any other questions at this time, or if not, I'll make a motion myself, but I think it's definitely something we need to keep hitting, and I don't want to wait till winter comes, because we're always lagging behind 2 or 3 months, and we'll miss the whole winter again, like we kind of did last year.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'll actually be happy to make a motion. Jamie, I know the one meeting you weren't there, and I was beating on that draft proposal down pretty hard. You may or may not have watched it or read the minutes. I think you did a really nice job in this version to outline tangible results, and I actually feel that the pricing that I'm seeing here is actually very fair. So I really appreciate you putting the effort into that and making that much more easy to nod off on. So I'll be happy to make a motion to move forward with that.
Okay, so that's motion by Wolf to move forward with the official
Change order 2.
right. Change order 2 of May 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in the amount of an additional $19,850. And do we have to say where the funds are coming from for that?
We do, I think.
Is that just out of the general operating fund, or?
I believe so. Ron, Joe, what do you think? Is that from the engineering budget line item?
We do, we've spent, I have to look. We do have a lot of projects going on that are engineering. We would definitely have some more, assuming our budget passes in July, we would definitely have the funding there to do this. I would feel more comfortable with that.
We could also take it out of the capital reserves, really realistically, couldn't we?
We can.
Why don't we do
that? That's the only thing. It's this, again, budget for engineering, but we've used on different tasks, whether it's been for salt or other projects, we've been pulling it out of the budget. So this wasn't specifically budgeted for. Again, if we get either capital reserves, or if we hold off till July, or approve a couple tasks now and then the remainder in the next budget, I would feel uncomfortable.
Like Don said, we should try to push this pretty hard so we have something going before the snow comes, right? Which it's funny to say that in March, May.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
But
I would feel better.
I'd rather kick this off than
I think any billings would probably come in the next fiscal year, starting in July, I would imagine, right? So
we can make that happen. Yeah.
maybe if we push it off onto the next budget season, would that make a difference?
It definitely would, yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's not, I don't think you're gonna hit the ground running real quick on this anyways and get it, all of the billings in, even if you did all the billing in June, we wouldn't pay it until July, so I guess does that count as being part of the next year's budget and then we're okay? So I don't know if we have enough information for that, but Wolf made the motion. I'll second it and if
I'd
there's any
probably
other-
suggest taking it out of the capital reserve because we have not touched them really a whole lot lately, and instead of taking it out of the operating budget and then
falling short on that.
And with the rate increase, we've already seen, at least for the immediate time right now, we seem to have some surplus available to us. So whatever surplus we're going to have is going to go, if I'm not mistaken, back on the capital reserve anyway, right?
Yes.
So
okay,
it's not, we're kind of refreshing that or replenishing that pretty quick.
So do we have to specify which capital reserve fund we're using?
I think we do, right? Just trying to find that, but since we didn't get that in the package, I would have to go back to the last meeting. Is that water source development?
No.
I don't think so either.
So it can't be equipment facilities, can't be land development, new well development. At this point, Michelle pointed out that some of the invoices from engineering are gonna be recategorized. So we'll be at about 100%, that'll be engineering, but if you wanna take it out of the capital reserve. And even if Jamie said if we do this for July 1st, then it doesn't matter either way.
No, we do it for July 1st. We'll be in the next budget. I'm comfortable with that.
I thought that Jamie said he could make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely make that happen. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Nice.
All right.
That's
Here it is. Capital reserve, acquisition of land, equipment and facilities, system development, extraordinary legal.
I don't think that would be source development. It's not really developing a source, I guess.
Well, it's system development, not source development.
Well, if it's next budget, we can use it.
Okay, I guess an operating budget.
I'm wondering in the future, is there a chance that you could, I know we've had budgets in the past of source development. I wonder if we could have a bucket that you could put for groundwater protection. That you would have a lot of different things that you could actually, it's kind of generic, but groundwater protection, I think there could capture a lot of things that that be important to the MVD. And that
You're
might be
talking starting up a capital reserve account, you mean?
Yeah, or something to that end, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Don't we already have a watershed protection account or anything? No?
I'm kind of surprised that we can't use the system development charge for any engineering activity that is not immediately tied to developing a new system. I mean, this is engineering work to protect our infrastructure, right? And to avoid that we have to abandon wells that are no longer proficient as far as their sodium chloride content goes, right? So that might be a discussion we need to have at another meeting with Michelle.
Right.
I'm thinking equipment and facilities, but just to get I want to get a clarification with legal on that. I'm thinking that because we're protecting our facilities.
But we don't have a capital reserve for that, do we?
Equipment and facilities we do.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay, I missed that one. Yeah. Okay, all right.
I would just want to get a clarification if we could use it on. I think we can. I know system development, that's going for future expansion, so technically that wouldn't be. Obviously, land wouldn't, future water rights.
I just know there's a push in general to go with expenditures like that to go rather for the capital reserve than going through the operating budget, because the operating budget may eventually hit the ratepayer much faster than the capital reserve. The $40,000 expense is a drop in the bucket for a $3.6 million capital reserve, right? But on the operating budget, it shows pretty quick.
You can prove it tonight going forward out of operation, but operational budget for July 1. But to look at capital reserves, and we can always, next meeting, we can change the
allocation.
funds from.
Yeah, and even if it's just for future decisions, it would be good to know if we can tap into that for similar orders.
Okay. So we'll leave it at the operating budget for now and change it if we think there's a different one we can take it from in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think as far as making the motion and approving the motion, we have to say where it's coming from tonight. So let's keep it operating budget, and then we'll look at changing that at some point in the future. All right. Any other questions or comments before I call a vote on it? So the motion was made by Wolf, seconded by myself, I believe. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And we'll go through roll call vote. Myself, I'm in favor. Wolf, what do you got?
Yes, in favor.
Joe?
Favor.
And Ken?
In favor.
Favor, good. Okay, so that's 4-0-0. So that budget's approved. That scope of work, Jamie? And
Thank you.
Jamie, can I put one caveat on that? Can
Sure.
we put a timeline on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a 6 to 7 month process. You
Right.
know, in terms of getting people engaged, and I'm unsure as to how I'm going to navigate the pandemic process. So I think we should let's try to put a 6 month. If we're at May 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe we should be thinking about the end of October at the very least. I mean, my hope is that that by the end of the summer, early September, we'll have some pretty good information on this.
Okay.
So
I understand.
Yeah.
Obviously, the goal is to try and have something tangible before the snow comes.
Correct.
So,
yeah. Right.
But I understand what you're saying. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to bring up at some point, and I think you guys have probably been thinking about it, if we end up doing our preliminary testing and we see that we've got a really good site, we're going to probably want to come back to you with a proposal to put in a larger diameter test boring, an 8-inch well, and do some hard pumping on, like we did over at the my mind is lost, but north of 7 and 8 there. What am I missing, Ron?
Mitchell Woods?
Huh?
The Hollis property?
Yeah, what's her name?
The Wright property.
The Wright property, yeah. That we'd want to put an 8-inch test boring in and do some pumping on that. But that's going to be something, it may come out of your new source budget. I don't know. But that's going to, if we get something that we really like and everybody's on board on it, we'll want to go forward. We'll probably want to go forward with that because that's going to be a lot cheaper than putting well 3 on.
Right.
So, but I think everybody's got that. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You've been very patient. I did a lot of material in a very short time.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I read that whole report. That was good, well written, and all the figures. So appreciate that.
Good. Thank you.
And I listened in. I'm gonna sign off.
All right, Keith.
Thanks,
Keith,
Jamie.
you and I will be talking in the morning.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck tonight. Thanks. Bye. You all set with me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was gonna say Peter fell asleep and fell off the chair.
I'm trying to eat dinner too. I'm like starving. I was cooking a little bit and listening. Have a good night, guys.
We'll see you.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye.
All right, so moving on, let's, should be able to wrap this up pretty quick. I think we're into the, meeting minutes.
Hey, Don, can we go back one? Do you want to do an action item for the equipment and facilities capital reserve that Ron's gonna take care of? Looking into what that covers?
You asked for it.
Good.
Oh, yeah. Good
Yeah,
quote.
please do. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
So that'd be another action item for Ron to follow up on the equipment and facilities, capital
What we can
reserve.
pull out of there?
Right. That sounds good. You got that, Amanda? Okay. All right, so anything else? Or we can move on to the minutes. So we got 2 minutes. We got the minutes from, I guess we can start with the meeting of April 20th, the regular meeting, the regular session. And I don't have any edits on that. Anybody have any comments or edits to offer on the April 20 minutes?
On the April 20? Yeah, I'm sorry, missed that.
Right.
We don't need to edit it, but on page 2 of 7, wells 4 and 5 treatment plan progress and the VFD delays. I'm pretty sure I already threw a fit that time, and it's not in the minutes, but I threw a fit enough today that we don't have to add it back to the meetings. So, but I'm really disappointed on that one, and I know we talked about the delays in the VFDs even I think prior to that meeting, like almost a month earlier than that. So, in general, I hope that we all try and not be too friendly with Penta and their supplier, and just ignore the fact that they're really putting a huge dent on our schedule, and we spend money to expedite it, and they're now making us 2 months later than we had hoped for, so we had planned for and spend money for. So no need for that change, but let's all try and be uncomfortable with that and uncomfortable for Penta.
I think we all share that frustration, Wolf.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so the May 1st special meeting. Anybody have any comments or edits to offer on that one? I'm good with those. So if no one has any changes, then we could probably do one motion to approve both minutes.
I'll abstain from 20th.
Okay. Somebody want to make that motion, or do you guys want more time to review, or?
I'll move.
Do them one at a time.
Okay, yeah, so we should do them separately then. So, all right, let's start with the April 20th. So Wolf, you're moving that one.
Yes, sir.
Seconded.
Second by Ken. Any other comments or discussion on that one? So all those in favor of approving the April 2020 minutes signify by saying aye.
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 We'll do roll call. Myself, I'm in favor. Wolf, what are your vote?
In favor?
And Joe, you said you were abstaining,
Abstain. He wasn't at the meeting.
right? And Ken, what's your vote?
Favor.
Okay, so that minutes passed by 301. And then the last minutes of May 1st, 2020. Does anybody want to move those minutes for approval?
So moved.
I'll move.
Moved by Wolf. Is that a second by Joe?
Yeah, second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we'll do roll call again. Myself, I approve. Wolf, what's your vote?
Yes, sir.
Wolf approves. Joe,
Aye.
you approve. And Ken?
Aye.
All right, so that carries 4-0-0. Next on the agenda is the commissioners to review a list of action items from previous meetings, as well as those to be added from this meeting. And I think we got an email of those. Where is it? I don't know if this probably isn't in your packet, but looks like Amanda put a summary of the previous action items all together. And if there's some of these we can cross off, let's cross them off.
I only sent those to you to review that's what you
Oh,
were
you did?
looking
Okay.
for. Yep.
So I'll just review them and we can decide if there's any updates or if we can scratch them off the list. So the first one dates back to February 24th. And that was to discuss the next steps for Emery and Garrett sodium and chloride reduction project. I think that one can be crossed off because I think we've taken that to the next level. If you guys agree with that. So I would say that we go ahead and scratch that off the list, so because we've already gone forward with the just by approving the scope of work tonight. So we've already done that. Item number 2, action item number 2 was Ron Miner was going to create a table of outstanding ESRs from Underwood and Emery and Garrett. I know that you presented that to us in the past, a couple meetings ago or last meeting, I'm not sure. And that was going to have the build 2 amounts compared to the ESR budgets. That might be something we want to kind of bring back time and again, possibly just to keep an update on where the budgets are, the billings are in reference to the budgets. Is that something you think we can maybe just bring up? I don't know if every meeting is required, but maybe periodically, just to see that where we stand with the engineering billing amounts versus the budgets. So I'd say we want to probably just keep that on. I don't know if you have anything to offer on that, Ron.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, why don't we leave the action item there, and absolutely, I can, every other meeting or something like that, if that's,
Right.
that's fine with the board, I can certainly update it and have it, I've done some updating to it, so I know it's gonna change monthly.
Yeah, it's going to change every time you get an invoice, basically.
Yeah,
Okay, so we'll leave that one on
Maybe
there.
once a quarter is
Yeah,
so we don't create more work than we have to.
okay.
maybe can we note that on the action item quarterly?
Sure. You want to make that change, Amanda? Okay. Action item number 3, Underwood Engineers to investigate any warranty consequences should there be mixing of vessels and media manufacturers. I don't know if they got back to us on that one.
I don't think they did.
Right? All right, so let's leave that one there. We'll try, maybe next time, we'll try to remember to look at these action items to see if some of them don't apply to us. And we can get answers from those of our consultants that are on the call here. The next one was also number 4, related to Underwood, was going to inquire whether radio transmission is state of the art, is a state requirement, or if it is a more appropriate, if there is a more appropriate state of the art technology. So we'll have to ask them about that one again.
Well, that's part of the
The
Part
investigation.
of their scope. Is that
part of the scope of the ESR. I wonder if we can actually take that off the action item list, because that is one of the,
Because it's in the scope.
yeah, it's in the scope of one of the ESRs.
Yeah.
So I'd probably be comfortable taking that off the action item list, or
All right.
or at least refer to the ESR. I can
Well,
look up the number.
I think I'd rather wait till it's addressed.
Yeah, I agree.
Because maybe if they forget to address it, it'll just fall away,
Yeah, I agree. You're right.
All right, so we'll leave,
It's part of that whole master plan ESR and all of those.
right. So at some point, they're gonna present a report and address it in that report, and then we can probably scratch it off the list, I think. So let's leave number 4 on. Number 5 was follow up with Jamie to graph the water quality for PFOA and PFOS for Penachuk system. Again, let's leave that on there until we actually see the graphs. I did bring it up, so he's aware of it. And you guys might have talked to him about it before, I'm not sure. Number 6, publish an update to the Facebook page regarding wells 4 and 5, posting photos and vessels. That was done. I believe we can clear that off. And then the last one was to publish an update to Facebook with a link to the article by Mike Metcalf. And I think that one's done too. I know that's on our website. So you can cross off 6 and 7. We'll leave 3, 4, and 5 and number 2. So 2, 3, 4, 5, I think we're going to keep, correct? That's
Amanda, if you want to add ESR 50, number 50, 50, for Underwood Engineers for that SCADA radio analysis.
right. So for action item number 4, you can reference the ESR 50.
50, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the SCADA and radio evaluation.
And then I don't know if Amanda, we've taken notes on the what was where 3 of them or 4 of them tonight that we added. And what are those? If you want to read them back to us, I think you're on mute.
Yes. Jill to find out about the town regulations for the stump dump. Asking about sending a letter to the landowner to remove the stump dump on MVD's property.
Right, a draft letter at this point for the next
Yep.
meeting.
Dawn to follow up on the PFOA results for Nashua's Penachuk system.
Okay.
To change runs follow up on action item number 2 to quarterly. And there's another one for Ron to follow up, but that's actually in the notes.
The capital reserve fund.
Yes, on the funds for that motion.
Right.
And I had one more just from the very beginning, Underwood with the change order summary. That Peter was gonna follow up on what the well 4 credit is going to be.
Okay.
Yeah, the cleaning credit that we don't need to pay.
Yep.
Good.
All right.
All right, so that, let's see here. So that covers that. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? So I think this is great, Amanda, that if you just keep like a separate running document with the, and keep the numbers the same. I wouldn't go back and renumber everything. That's just gonna confuse everything, so.
Okay, do you want them separated by dates like that? Does that make it easier so you can reference the notes if you need to?
Yeah, this is fine by me.
Okay.
Yeah. So as the ones go away, like number 1 goes away, then obviously you can just delete the whole February 24th, number 1.
Right.
And then, but keep the next one numbered as number 2.
Okay.
Don't start changing the numbers again, because then we're gonna get thoroughly confused. I know
Okay.
I will. So we're gonna have some numbers here that are eventually gonna be just higher sequential numbers that keep going, and there'll be some missing in between there as we cross them off. But I think that way we can track these better as we go through. So yeah, so that's gonna work fine by me anyways. So if we're all set with that, I can move on. If anybody doesn't have any other questions on the action items, we can move on to old business. Does anybody have any business to discuss, updates?
So just to, as of today, we finally have a facility to have our annual meeting at, and it's been postponed to June 9th. It'll be at the upper elementary school in the Smith gym. Normally it's in the APR, so this is it's the one that's a little bit further back in the building, closer to the elementary school.
Can you repeat the date, please?
What?
9.
Can you repeat the date, please?
Oh, the date, June?
Yeah.
June 9th, 7 PM at the Upper Elementary Smith Gym, not the APR that we're normally in. And we're working out I went down with Tom today, Tom Tussaud, and we went into the gym and kind of figured out how we could do the social distancing by using bleachers that people can be as far apart as they want to be. We set up, there'll be, each of the commissioners at this point will have their own 6-foot table for your own social distancing. We'll have a podium. I know it's going to be fun. We'll have about 20 chairs set up in the middle of the floor, and that's to be ADA compliant for the American Disabilities Act. Because I know we were talking about leaving the bleachers open, but we need to have some chairs available. We'll have hand sanitizer there and wipes, and I already notified the moderator that we confirmed the room as well as the supervisors of the checklist. So I'll be in touch with them tomorrow because they only found out at 1 o'clock today that we had the room. At 2 o'clock I met with Tom, and then we rolled into obviously the board meeting. So I'll be in touch with them tomorrow to kind of get some more ideas of how the supervisors of the checklist are going to operate for their protection, the town as well.
Good. Sounds very involved. Thanks for following up on all those items.
It's a lot of fun.
Sure, it's a lot of fun, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any old business? If not, we could move on to new business.
I have one quick comment on the new business. I don't know if anybody read the audit report here from whatever the pronunciation is, Plutzig and Sanderson, I guess.
Yeah.
There was a comment made in here that I thought serves to be recognized and paid attention to. And staff is probably going to see that coming here. Disaster recovery, data retention, and data security policies. It called out that we don't have any. So, and to my understanding, at least from my own job, a lot of these are pretty much copy and paste from policies that are out there. Maybe even the state maybe has something we can go by. But
That was again. I'm sorry, you kind of blocked out a little bit. I didn't hear what the term for it.
Yeah, where is that? Is that in the cover letter?
So, yeah, no, actually it's in the, well, yeah, it is. So when you look at the Plutzig and Sanderson annual financial report and the audit, let's see where that is. I think it was in the cover letter, which for some reason it's not here. Why is it not here?
Definitely be going into that some more with the auditors because they'll be coming to a meeting to go over that with the commissioners. But I definitely like to give Michelle a heads up if there's something particular.
I'm not sure where I put that letter now.
Oh, it's on page 2 under information technology policies.
Yeah, I think so, right. Here it is. Correct. Per review of internal controls over information technology, we noted that the district does not have formally documented policies or procedures for disaster recovery, data retention, or data security. As data retention and security of data are paramount to the integrity of the financial system, formal policies are necessary. We recommend that the district implement a disaster recovery, data retention, and security policy and communicate these policies to staff. Considering the fact that we have 20,000 people's worth of data in our database somewhere.
Yeah, we don't have a policy, but we do have backup.
Right, but how are we gonna? So what data security, data retention policies say is, what happens if we have a fire, right? That destroys our service. Where do we store the backups? Do we store them in the same building? Are they on the cloud? Was that up in the cloud or upstairs?
In the cloud.
In the cloud?
We've always stored off-site,
Yeah.
Right.
so in the
So-
past,
Right, but then how fast do we get them back onto our server, right? And backups are nice, but anybody that has worked with data knows that getting the data back on your server in a usable way isn't as easy as people might think. It's not just a press a button kind of thing. And we probably have a rollback then. How much time, how much data do we lose from that backup, right? So it might be a daily, maybe weekly, maybe monthly backup, right? But there's a loss in data, there's a loss in transactions. The next question is, what if we get hacked, right, for some reason, and some user data is being stolen, payment information, credit card information. I don't know what information we store of our customers and suppliers, but the next question is, what happens if we are subject to a phishing email, and one of our HR people, I personally have experience with a case where an email was masked as a business owner that sent an email to one of his employees in payroll asking for all W-2s of all employees. But in reality, it wasn't the email. It wasn't the business owner emailing the HR payroll employee. It was an outside hacker. So all W-2s made it out. And sure enough, all the social security numbers and everything were compromised. So how do we deal with that? How would we respond to that? There's policies out there that employers should have in place, and we probably need to think about how much of that do we need to do.
Okay.
You think there are templates out there somewhere that we can start from?
I know there are, and
Sorry, Michelle's got a network that she's through the New Hampshire
exactly right.
Association that she gets some really good information on end templates and that type of
Yeah.
thing. I'm sure she'll be in touch with them too.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big effort really at all, but it's also a matter of liability, because if we're not doing that and we're being caught with our pants down, we can be, held much more liable than if we had these policies in place. If we have policies in place and they fail, that's one thing. But if we don't have them in place at all, that means we were negligent, which is a big difference.
no, absolutely.
Go ahead, Ron. Did you say something, Ron? I thought I
Oh,
answered.
no, I said absolutely no. When we always, we'll get the reports and then, we'll address deficiencies and, and go forward. So, yeah, we'll definitely, have it in, policies to the board.
I was going to say, it sounded like a good action item number 8 that you could put on Michelle's plate if you want. So she's not here to debate it. So.
And I'll be glad to help with that. I might have some resources that I can tap into too. Get some templates for that kind of stuff. I don't know our IT environment, so I can't really speak for that. But I might be able to dig out some templates for that as well.
Okay. So that's for Michelle and Wolf action item.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the next number is. Okay, any other new business to be discussed by anybody? If not, then we could move to the superintendent's report.
I have nothing, so.
All right. And I don't know if we've been looking, if there are any questions from the public.
Nobody dialed in. I've been watching the participants the whole time. So.
Okay. And questions from the press? We have no press there. So if no one else has any other closing comments, then I guess we can entertain a motion to adjourn. And before we leave, I want to say the next meeting is scheduled for June 15th. Depending on what the governor says, I think might that be an in-person meeting back in the MVD office? I guess we can make that decision later, but we're actually going to have our annual meeting before that anyways. It's going to be on June 9th. So guess that's it. That's all I have. So I'll make the motion to adjourn. If anyone wants to second it, or we can stay here all night. It's up to you.
Second.
All right, motion by myself, second by Joe. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. See you later.
Roll call, myself, I'm in favor. Wolf,
Yes, sir.
Joe, you in favor of adjourning?
No move.
And Ken.
Yes, please.
All right, so we're adjourned 4-0-0. Thanks, everybody, for your help. And I guess we'll see you next time at the annual meeting or before that.
Good.
Everybody stay well. Thank you.
Good night.